And you're all set.
Okay, good evening, everybody. This is the October 2020 meeting of the Southborough Board of Selectmen. We initially convened at 5:30. The meeting was called to order immediately on a unanimous vote with Ms. Malinowski not participating, voted to go into executive session for the items listed on our revised agenda. And we are now proceeding to our public session part of the agenda. I've already read this once, but now for the recorded part of the meeting and the open session part of the meeting, I'm going to read it again. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Southborough Board of Selectmen will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right and a requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Southborough's website at www.southboroughtown.com. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch or participate in the meeting may do so in the following manner by finding the meeting at www.southboroughtown.com/remote meetings. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so despite best efforts, we will post on Southborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. And as I said, just for purposes of the record, we initially convened at 5:30, went into executive session, read that preamble before going into executive session, convened an executive session for the items that are identified on our revised agenda. At about 6:35 p.m., voted unanimously to leave executive session, and we are now on the open session portion of our agenda, which starts off with item 3, public comment. And I am looking on participants. I do not see any hands raised.
There is one hand raised.
Okay.
2, actually.
Okay. Can you bring them in to the extent you saw any sort of an order, Vanessa? The first person you bring in is Ms. Cram?
Yes.
All right, Ms. Cram, I think hopefully you can hear me. You are muted, and now you are not. So welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting, public comment section. You wish to comment?
Thank you. I do wish to comment. I live on Bigelow Road, and there is currently a proposed project for a trail to go into property owned by the Southborough Open Land Foundation here on Bigelow Road, and that's currently before the Conservation Commission for approval. My neighbors and I would like to just bring this to your attention because it also involves 3 proposed parking spots, as well as a trail and a platform, which would be like a viewing platform to look out on the wetlands. So we currently have a lot of traffic on the street already because of the fact that there are trails across the street from us. There's state forest and there are trails in there. And there's also, I believe it's the Solwink Foundation down the street from us in Westborough. And those trails are also connected to it. So there's no real parking for the trails in the state forest, but there is a parking lot down in Westborough if you go head down the dirt road. So we have a lot of issues with parking. There is a turnaround across the street from my house that is supposed to be for school buses and emergency vehicles, and there's people park there all the time, and the school bus ends up having to try to turn around in my driveway, sometimes in my neighbor's driveway. We've seen them actually back down the street into like halfway down the street to a neighbor that has like a loop in their driveway. So parking has been a real issue. My neighbors who are also, I believe, on the meeting have had people parking on their property, like overlapping on their lawn, and they damaged sprinkler heads. So there's just been a lot of issues with this, with people turning around and just increased traffic, which is concerning, I think, for the neighbors who have children. We'd also live on, it's a dead-end street. So like I mentioned, there's a dirt road that goes to Westborough. So it appears as a through road on GPS, but it actually is a dead-end street, and the dirt road is not maintained and it's not plowed during the winter, which a lot of people get stuck there during the winter months. And I think those are all of my issues, and my neighbors, Rob and Donna Sergi, were going to give a little more information.
Okay, well, why don't we hear from them, and then can I again, if this is public comment, it's not a real discussion, but I'm assuming this is by our Trails Committee that is proposing this. Have you been in contact with them?
So actually, I don't think that they are involved in this at all. It's a Boy Scout, it's an Eagle Scout project, and they are working with Southborough Open Land Foundation, and I believe just the Conservation Commission is aware of this, to our knowledge anyway. We haven't heard of, like the planning board being involved when we think that they should be, because there are certain statutes and bylaws that need to be complied with as well. And currently, I don't think anyone is overseeing this project other than the Conservation Commission, and their jurisdiction is just the wetlands. They have nothing to do with the parking or even the trail in.
All right. Well, again, the reason public comment is important, Ms. Cram, is this is something I was entirely unaware of. I appreciate your bringing it to our attention. As I said, this is I'm not doing this for any other reason other than it's public comment, not a full-blown discussion.
Yes.
And I'm going to go to your neighbors. I see an RJ and a Sergi.
Yes, I think Rob and Donna Sergi.
Okay. One or both of you wish to speak?
Yes.
Okay.
My name is Donna Bigelow Sergi, and I just want, this land was donated by my family to Open Land Foundation. This first notice of intent came up on August 20th, and we're still continuing with this. We are in the process of getting you some documentation and putting together a letter. So we're hoping to get on your agenda for next time to discuss this, because we think it's a far bigger project than just the conservation. It extends, they don't have jurisdiction over part of this. And the parking spaces, we have a very tiny dirt road. And again, I know it's just public comment right now, and we can go into detail at a later time, but we did want to bring it up to your attention. The emergency vehicles, the school buses, this road is a dead end street. There is a dirt road on paper, and we're concerned about the safety, and especially I worked with the MDC, my father, in the town of Southborough to create this turnaround for the buses and the emergency vehicles years ago. We are now having the MDC open up hunting season on this property, on the MDC property, which causes a lot more traffic. And with that being said, the parking spaces that are being proposed, we don't feel it's safe. On top of, we have requested a certified survey of the land, which they have not done yet. And I'm not sure if they're going to be doing it, but we also feel that there are some property boundaries being crossed.
Yeah. So hi everybody. This is Rob Sergi, Donna's husband. So yeah, I mean, bottom line, that's really part of the Conservation Committee issues on that. We're addressing that in the next meeting. We really just want to bring this to your attention so you can guide this also, because it does include parking, which really conservation has no say in per se. And as Cindy explained, and my wife, there is a lot of traffic on this road. It's a very quiet road. There's a lot of privacy we want to keep. And again, the increase of traffic in folks coming on the hunting side of the MDC now, as well as the proposed parking area. And if you're familiar with it, it's very small. So it's something that we live on a small street. We want to keep it that way. We have privacy as well. So we just want to make sure that you guys are aware of it. We'll be sending you a detailed email with some of our concerns. But again, we'll follow the procedures with the Conservation Committee, which we are. So I just want to make sure that you folks are aware of it as well, because I think that's the proper position that we have to take when it comes to parking.
All right, appreciate that, and you're dotting your i's and crossing your t's the right way, which is number one, bring it to our attention through this medium, and number two, provide more detailed information, because obviously, from our perspective as well as the other boards and committees in town, we have to figure out exactly where jurisdiction lies in any sort of decision making on this. So it sounds like we're going to be getting some additional materials from you.
Correct. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Ms. Hale, or
That was it for public comment so far.
okay, yeah, that's right. I see Ms. Sergi. Okay, I think we are all set then. I'm going to move on to item 4, and the first item on item 4 is the tax classification hearing joint meeting with Board of Assessors. Mr. Sabelli, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, honorable board members. Mr. Chairman, just want to welcome the public to our annual classification hearing. So I will be presenting on behalf of the board. My assistant Corinne Diaz is here with us. We're live from Capitol Hill. Before we begin, I just want to make sure, did you all receive the updated presentation? We did have a $50,000 reduction in revenue through local aid. As a result, we had to redo the presentation. It basically increased the tax rate 2 cents, and the average tax bill went up $13 as a result of that. But we have reworked the presentation to reflect this.
I think, and I suspect I'll get nods. I saw this, and I think everybody, I think it was sent to all members of the board. Heads are nodding, so you have a green light to go ahead.
All right. I also just want you to understand it's important that you do understand at this time the Commonwealth's budget, which is typically voted and approved. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, the state's budget is not finalized, and it is unknown when that'll occur. As it stands now, communities will be setting tax rates based on local aid estimates instead of actual numbers. After speaking with our Department of Revenue Bureau of Accounts rep, we will not be submitting the tax rate for another 3 to 4 weeks. So typically what happens is we have the hearing, and the next morning I set the tax rate. By delaying our submission, it will give us additional time to accommodate any potential changes to local aid that may come in the near future. So we will proceed tonight with the classification hearing, which is not to set the actual tax rate, but decide if we will continue with a single tax rate or adopt a split rate. Keep in mind that the additional changes to local aid that result in a further, loss of funds that could change projected tax rate within our presentation. Any questions on these? I just want to make sure everybody is clear that the state's budget is not finalized, but we're going to proceed anyway. You guys all good?
I think it's understood. I guess, is there a sense, and either for you or Mr. Purple, what sort of a timetable that is on, and just how it will affect what you, in other words, when you get that information, what's the additional steps that you'll need to do? Maybe you could address that.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just one thing before we get going too far down the road, I really think that we should properly open the hearing, as well as read the hearing notice.
Oh, I always forget to do that. I apologize.
Oh, I know. And Paul gets so excited coming in. He just wants to get going. So, but I think procedurally, if you want to take 2 seconds, I'll read the notice.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and do that?
Formally vote to open the hearing, and then we can continue. The Southborough Board of Selectmen shall hold a public hearing with the Board of Assessors Tuesday, October 20th, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. to determine the certified valuation of each class of property, the minimum residential factor, and the allocation of the tax burden among the 4 classes of real property: residential, open space, commercial, and industrial, and personal property. The public hearing will be held in a virtual meeting, may be viewed by the public through a link located at www.southboroughtown.com/remote meetings. All interested parties are encouraged to view and or participate. Additionally, interested citizens may present written views prior to the public hearing. Board of Selectmen and Board of Assessors.
So I'll move to open it pursuant to that notice.
Second.
Discussion. None. Ms. Braccio?
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski?
Aye.
Mr. Shea?
Aye.
Mr. Stivers?
Aye.
And Mr. Healy is aye. And two things. Number one, it is it's a stubbornness in my head because I don't see why if you publish the legal notice, why you then have to read it at the beginning of the meeting. I understand it's the common practice in the Commonwealth. I just think it's crazy. That's number one. Number two, Mr. Sabella, you don't have to repeat everything you said up till now.
We ready to move forward or?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to jump right in.
Actually, Paul, I had asked you the two questions though, and for you or Mr. Purple, in terms of is there a sense of what the timetable is for getting the final budget information? And once you get that, will you be coming back to us, or will you provide us with sufficient information tonight so that when you get that information, you'll be able to act?
Yeah, Marty, when I spoke with, again, Andrew Nelson is our rep from the Department of Revenue that we deal with, Bureau of Local Assessment. I asked them those very questions. They do not have a timetable on the state finalizing. We're still working off the governor's numbers. So he was not optimistic in telling me 2 weeks, 3 weeks. We really just don't know. So it's, I mean, you know, welcome to business during COVID, right? As far as what we will do is we will eventually have to set a tax rate. Again, we'll probably wait 3 or 4 weeks to see if there's any additional changes. And then at that point, if we did in fact receive notice that local aid had been reduced, no, I do not have to come back in front of you. This is just a hearing for a split rate versus a continuing with a single rate. What we would do is just change the recap and submit it. That's all it would be. There would be changes to just the local aid number, the overlay number, which balances the recap, and it would be submitted as is. Our work is done. It is really just waiting for the state's, latest local aid to set the tax rate. And again, we'll wait based what our rep told us. You know, what's the rush? Because once you set the rate, it's set. And you'd have to make adjustments on the fly or have a special town meeting within the town meeting if we had a significant change in local aid, which I don't anticipate we will.
Okay.
Hopefully I've answered the questions.
Yeah, you did. Sorry to pull you off the track of your presentation, but go ahead now. Thanks.
Okay, Marty, we're going to buzz through this pretty quick. I know you got kind of a packed agenda and you're a little behind. So what is the tax classification? All communities have to have different tax rates for certain classes of properties. Residential, open space, it allows communities to have different tax rates for certain classes of property. So our classes are residential, open space, which we don't use, commercial, industrial, and personal property. State statute provides a maximum allowable portion of the tax levy, up to 150% to be borne by the CIP classes. Again, that's going to be a commercial, industrial, and personal property grouped together. It also provides a minimum allowable portion to be borne by the residential class. Tax classification key concepts. It allows the Board of Selectmen to make the decision whether or not to shift tax burden from one class of property to another. No additional tax dollars are raised as the tax levy remains the same. Town of Southborough has never had a split tax rate, and it's an issue between fairness between the classes. Let's just talk a little bit about the fiscal year assessments. The FY21 assessments are based on analysis of calendar year 2019 sales and market conditions. So again, this is pre-COVID market conditions. The FY21 assessments reflects the value of properties as of January 1st, 2020. This is per Department of Revenue guidelines. So it's the same across the Commonwealth for all communities. Calendar year 2020 sales and market conditions will be reflected in the FY 2022 assessments, as there is a 1-year time lag in the assessment process. What is happening to assessments? Residential class increased 4.55%. Now, this is the total value of the entire class. I don't want people to read into that everybody's assessment went up or taxes are going up 4.55. Some could go up significantly more, some less. Commercial class increased 0.88%. Industrial class increased 10.10%. And the personal property class increased 15.82%. Town's total valuation increased by 126.55 million to a new high of 2.752 billion in FY21. So this small town's coming up on 3 billion, which is kind of amazing. Some additional comments on this slide. The industrial class increase was skewed by a $8.23 million assessment increase to 34 St. Martin Drive, which resulted in about 134,300 rise in their taxes. So that class is a little bit skewed. The other one I really needed to talk to you about was the personal property class. The increase was due to a change in valuation methodology mandated by the DOR of all 504 personal property accounts. What are 504 accounts? They're your utility companies: Mass Electric, NSTAR Electric, NSTAR Gas, and New England Power. This mandate requires communities to have these accounts appraised annually, and for us, it's a cost of about $8,000. So if you remember, during the budget season, we had a late addition to our budget. Now for the good news. The assessment for these accounts increased 48.6% in total, which had resulted in $208,200 rise in their taxes. So we invested $8,000, we got $208,200 in tax dollars. These tax dollars will shift burden from the other taxpayers in town to these accounts. This value increase is not, I repeat, is not counted as new growth. The bad news, we are anticipating these 4 companies will appeal these new valuation methodology to the appellate tax board. Marty, this probably, you remember the telecom cases of years ago. So it looks like we may be heading down that same road. The end result is an additional $170,000 will be added to our overlay estimate of $400,000. That was the original budget to help offset potential exposure created by these huge, large valuation changes. How do we arrive at that? I basically took the money for the personal property, the 208, the 134 on that one, and basically took 50% of that and added it to the overlay to make sure that we're adequately protected. Again, I just want to make sure that you guys understand we're probably going to head to some litigation on this. Any questions on that? Moving right along. Fiscal year 2021 new growth. The assessors calculated $47.349 million in new growth value within the town. This equates to $788,843 in new growth tax dollars. Although this results in an 11.89 decrease in new growth from FY20, it's still a very good year for us. Although new growth is down, again, it did exceed the 10-year average, as you can see, of 659,886. New growth is highlighted by construction of 20 new condo units and 17 single-family homes in various stages of construction. On the commercial side, we had a renovation of an office building in the data center located at 34 St. Martin. Those both contributed to our new growth. Moving on to the next slide. The average single-family assessed home increased $26,300 to $660,700, or a 3.4% increase. And this is the 11th consecutive year it has risen. Next slide. Vanessa there. Next slide. There we go. The single rate impact on residential. If we continue with a single tax rate, the FY21 tax rate would decrease from 1666 to 1621. And again, that's because we had such large increases overall to the town's total value. The average single family tax bill would rise from $10,569 in 20 to $10,710 in 21, which is $141 or a 1.33% increase. Let's remember that excludes our friend, the Community Preservation Act surcharge, which is another $90 on top of that. The next slide, it just shows you the 8-year history of the average single family tax bill. Moving on, the single rate impact for commercial, industrial, and mixed use properties. So the average assessed commercial industrial mixed-use property rose from 3,066,400 to 3,141,300, a 2.4% increase. The average commercial industrial mixed-use tax bill would actually fall from 51,086 to 5920, 0.32% decrease. Again, it's pretty much just an even as it was last year, same as last year. Let's look at the relationship of the property classes. So the commercial and industrial and personal property classes, as we refer to as the CIP, combined represents 19.70% of the town's total value in FY21. This is up slightly from the previous year at 19.49. And I believe last year's was also up from the prior year. History shows that the CIP typically runs between 17 and 20% in Southborough. The board's recommendation is unanimously is to continue with a single rate for FY21. The reasons why, well, I think it's just the one big reason really right now that matters. It's COVID-19. Businesses of all sizes are struggling. We all know that. They're all struggling to survive. The end of the pandemic is unknown, leaving the future of many of these businesses unclear. Not the time for additional tax burden to be placed on these classes. Vanessa, we're going to skip over the next two. Those are the typical reasons we go over. Let's just go right to additional facts. 242 of the 351 communities, 69%, have a single tax rate in fiscal year 2020. 2015, the town meeting voted overwhelmingly to defeat a non-binding article to have a split tax rate. In April 2015, town meeting voted to fund a part-time economic development coordinator to help expand future business development within the community. Thus, a split tax rate would be prohibitive to the EDC's goals. Okay, what I want to do now is just take a look at a tax rate shift. And what we did is just ran a scenario at 5%. So if you look at the top box, it's showing you a single family and a commercial industrial property valued at $660,700. The tax rate would be $1,621. And the average tax bill would be $10,710. Now, if we look at a 5% tax shift scenario, the residential rate would decrease to $1,601, while the CIP would increase to $1,702. This produces only a 1.23 or $132 savings on the residential property, while increasing CIP property by 5% or $535. In round numbers, based on all the CIP split, for every $1 you save on the residential class, it costs $4 on the CIP. Next slide, Vanessa. Everybody likes to see what the rates are around our town. You can see there, these are all last year's rates. Nobody has set a rate. The only comment I want to make is on Hopkinton. Is it Hopkinton? Yes, you'll see two rates there, but it says split rate. No, they in fact do not have a split rate. They have a means tested residential exemption that they apply to the residential class only. So don't be confused on that. Moving on. Okay, there's the other two tax shift options that are available that we need to discuss. They are the residential exemption and the small commercial exemption. Although Southborough is not a likely candidate to adopt either of these two exemptions, they should be discussed, and a formal vote must be taken by the Board of Selectmen to complete the classification hearing. Unlike the split rate option, that shifts burden from one class to another, so from residential to CIP. The residential exemption and small commercial exemption shift burden within the property class. As with the split rate, no additional taxes are raised by either of these exemptions. So we're briefly going to talk about them. The residential exemption, shifts tax burden within the residential class from the lower assessed properties to seasonal rental and higher assessed properties. Allowed only on residential property that's a primary residence of the taxpayer. If adopted, the residential exemption may be up to 35% of the average assessed value of all residential parcels. Accepting this option increases the residential tax rate only. Typically, this exemption is adopted in areas with a low rate of owner occupancy or seasonal. Barnstable and Nantucket would be examples of that. Communities with a lot of rental property, Boston and Cambridge. You can see on the slide the math there. So if you looked at a $400,000 property, multiplied it by the tax rate of 1621, you would have a tax bill of $6,484,000. If you adopted a 10% exemption, that would work out to be $62,045. You would take that, subtract it off the assessed value of $400,000. You would come up with a value of $337,955, and you would multiply that by the higher tax rate. It would give you a tax bill of $6,009, and in this case, at a lower end house, it's a savings of $475. If you go to a high-end house, an $850,000 house, you can see through the math there that it actually is an increase to them of $231. The break-even point is the $702,645. So anything over that, people would pay more. Anything under that, there would be a slight savings. 15 of 351 communities adopted this. So you can see it's not very popular. Again, you typically find it down the Cape or areas where you have a lot of rental property. Let's go to the small commercial exemption. Grants a small commercial exemption to all Class 3 commercial properties that are occupied by businesses with an average annual employment of no more than 10 people and an assessed valuation of less than $1 million. Adopting this exemption increases the commercial and industrial tax rates. This exemption creates a tax burden shift that reduces the taxes paid by owners of properties occupied by a small business and shifts them to larger commercial and industrial taxpayers. The amount of the tax levy paid by these two classes remains the same. The exemption is for the property owner, not the small business. So the small business doesn't necessarily, or will, unless they own the building, doesn't benefit from this. Previously, 14 of 351 communities adopted this in FY20. Again, the Board of Assessors, these really don't apply to the town of Southborough, so we would unanimously recommend not to adopt either of them. And lastly, it's just a further, Mr. Chairman, it's just a further action you need to take, selectmen discussion, public comment, and then the selectmen need to take the 3 votes, one on a split rate, residential exemption, and the small commercial exemption. Turning it back over to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Paul. And you and I had a chance to talk earlier this week, and I had a number of my questions answered during that conversation. I am going to go, I guess I'll start off with Mr. Shea. If you have questions or comments?
I don't. Actually, this is the 6th presentation of this that I've seen. It's, I'd say if I had questions, I wasn't doing my job the last 5 years. So I'm actually good. And obviously this changes from year to year, but excellent presentation. I'm good.
Yeah, and I should have said, Paul, before I started out, that it was a very good, very easy to follow and understand presentation. So appreciate that. Mr. Stivers.
Yes, I'll echo Mr. Shea's comments. I've seen at least 10 of these, and so I think I'm pretty familiar with the process. I actually support the recommendation of the assessors. I will pass on my annual pitch about the split tax rate. I certainly feel the pain of the local businesses, but I also actually feel the pain of residents who are, I think, in many cases suffering at least as much. And I think we need to keep that in mind. But for now, I think the single tax rate makes sense. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Braccio.
I am just going to second and third those comments and say, Paul, thank you again for a great presentation. This is my 3rd or 4th time seeing them. And as always, you seem to answer the questions before they get to us. So thank you.
And Ms. Malinowski.
Thank you, Mr. Sabelli. Excellent presentation. I don't have any questions either. Thank you.
All right, Paul, I don't have a question. I just have I guess a final comment before we go to public comment. And that is, I think it was important for you to highlight the impact of the COVID-19 on the businesses. I mean, I think, the split tax rate is always an interesting discussion, and Mr. Stivers, at least last year, and I've seen him in different contexts in previous years, has made some very good points. I don't think this is the year to be making those points, though. We want to keep as many businesses as possible open and operating in the town of Southborough, and a discussion perhaps for another day, but not for this fiscal year. So with that, I am looking for any public comment from our 10 attendees.
I do not see any.
I don't see any. I'm disappointed. I don't want to charge him up, Mr. Geyer. I do not see in the audience out there. Maybe he's even taken a break this year because of the the unfortunate circumstances of COVID-19.
Let me send a couple of text messages.
No, that's good. We're fine. We're fine, Sam. All right. So I think we're fine for public comment.
I will move to close the public hearing.
I'll second. Discussion? None. Ms. Braccio?
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski? Chelsea, I just want to tell you, I'm not sure, but we're getting weird feedback the last 2 times you spoke. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
3 times in a row now. I'm not sure what's causing it. Mr. Shea?
Aye.
Mr. Stivers?
Aye.
And Mr. Healy is aye. The public hearing is closed. And so now we have 3 items to consider. The first is, I guess, Mr. Sabelli, what is your preference for the way we phrase this? Should Southborough adopt the split tax rate? Is that the motion and then we defeat it? Or that we
make the motion,
maintain?
you're going to continue with a single tax rate.
Okay,
for
so
FY 21.
I will move that for fiscal year 21, that we continue in the town of Southborough with a single, not split tax rate.
Second.
So,
Ms. Braccio seconded.
Brent.
Discussion? None. Ms. Braccio?
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski?
Aye. Aye.
Mr. Shea?
aye.
Mr. Stivers?
Aye.
And Mr. Healy is aye. So that is adopted unanimously. And same question for this one. Do you need an affirmative vote or a negative vote, Paul?
So basically, you're just going to make a motion that the residential, you do not want to adopt the residential exemption or the small commercial exemption.
All right, well, I'm going to go with residential first. I move that for fiscal year 21, that the town of Southborough not adopt the residential exemption.
Second.
Discussion? None. Ms. Braccio?
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski?
Aye.
Mr. Shea?
Aye.
Mr. Stivers?
Aye.
And Mr. Healy is aye. So that passes unanimously. So it's not adopted for fiscal year 21. And finally, I move that the town of Southborough not adopt for fiscal year 21 the small commercial exemption. Is that the correct phraseology?
Yep.
Okay.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Stivers. Discussion? None. Ms. Braccio?
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski?
Aye.
Mr. Shea?
Aye.
Mr. Stivers?
Aye.
And Mr. Healy is aye. That is also not adopted unanimously. So, Paul, anything else you want to add?
No, just like I say, we will hold the recap. It is done. Has been completed, and we'll hold it for the next 3 or 4 weeks, see what happens. If any changes come to local aid that will affect the tax rate, I'm sure Mark will be informing you about it. And we'll just move forward with the finance team and make the adjustments and go forward. If we don't hear anything, we'll be and the budget isn't finalized, the tax rate will be set using the estimates.
Okay.
Same with other communities.
Terrific. All right, Paul, thank you. Thank your department for continued good work, and thank your board for nice work as well.
Thanks, Marty. Have a good night.
All right, you too. All right. Next up, I guess we'll just go in the order they're listed on the agenda. Is Ms. Liu, if I'm saying that correctly, with us? I do. I see her.
Yes. Hang on one second.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Ms. Lou. Hi, this is Marty Healy. How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. Appreciate your, well, a number of things. Number one, appreciate your volunteering. Appreciate your being able to be here tonight. I'm going to go very quickly to the first member of our board, Mr. Stivers, for any questions or comments. I will just say very quickly that very impressed with your background. I think you'd be a terrific fit for a number of committees in town, and I think the ADA committee is getting a terrific new member. At least that's my view. So with that, I will turn over to Mr. Stivers for any questions or comments he might have for you.
Thank you and welcome, Ms. Lou. I echo the chairman's comments. You appear to be very well qualified for this. Have you actually attended any of our ADA committee meetings so far?
No, I have not. I just moved here about a couple of months ago, but I did talk to the chairman of that committee just last week.
Ah, okay. So you have a little bit up to speed in terms of what they're doing at least. So that's good.
Right. He shared with me in terms of the possible evaluation coming up in spring, which kind of relates to the work I've done on accessibility as well as information accessibility. Those are two parts, architectural as well as informational. We talked about that in depth last time.
Good. We do have a lot of work to do in that area, I think. So you sound like you'll be very well qualified, and I certainly support your appointment here. Thank you.
Ms. Braccio.
Thank you. Ms. Lou, thank you so much for stepping forward to serve. I second what Chairman Healy said. I think you're a terrific fit. I think you would have been a terrific fit for any of the committees that you had applied for. So thank you for stepping forward. I look forward to seeing you work with the ADA committee and bring them forward. So I also support your nomination. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Malinowski.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for coming and for volunteering your time to serve on one of our committees. Is there something specific that you're looking to accomplish with the ADA committee? I know you had applied for a variety of different capacities, and it seems like you have a lot of great experience. I'm just wondering if there was something specific for ADA.
I did talk to the chairman regarding this last week. He did share with me the accessibility work you're doing. And I also will, given my experience, I've done a number of things regarding connecting the volunteers with individuals who are disabled in the community. I did ask him during this very tough time what we're doing right now for the disabled community within Southborough. So that's something I would be interested in doing, continue doing, but in the context of Southborough. I am doing a little bit right now for MAVI, which is a Massachusetts Association for Vision Impaired. But that's most of the people we've been working with, actually my daughter and I have been working with, are not in Southborough. So maybe there's potentially a need here in this town, and during COVID, especially with holiday season coming up, wondering what we can do. In addition to the Meal on Wheels program that you have, potentially there are things that are relating to the social emotional aspect that could be contributing, even to what we can do in this area. So that's an area that I'll be interested in serving if there's capacity.
That's great. Thank you. I'm looking forward to supporting your appointment.
And Mr. Shea.
Likewise, looking forward to supporting your appointment. Very impressed in reading your background materials with your dedication, commitment to inclusion for those with all abilities. And thank you very much for stepping forward. I think we have a great addition to this committee.
All right, Ms. Lou, you're back to me. I think I said this at the beginning, but if I didn't, I should have. I'd forgotten that you're a new arrival in Southborough. So welcome, welcome to the town. Not just as a volunteer, but just welcome to the town. It's nice to have you and your family here.
Thanks to 2020, we're here.
I'm sorry.
Thanks to 2020, quote unquote, we're here. It was not expected. The Americans living abroad for many years, we came here for vacation and could not return. So we decided to stay here for a number of years.
Oh, wow. Got interesting stories that,
It's a long story, but yeah.
all right. Well, I guess this inures to our benefit, and the ADA committee's benefit.
I am very happy to help out in any way, shape, form I can.
Okay, and just the little dialogue you've had with members of the board, the ADA committee is going to be well served. You're obviously incredibly conversant in this area. It sounds like you've got an awful lot to add. So, with that, is there a motion?
I'll move to appoint Ms. Liu to the ADA committee, a term expiring 6/30/21. It says in the agenda it's 20, but it should be 21, I think.
So
With that
just-
amendment to what exists on the agenda, is there a second?
Second.
By Ms. Malinowski. Discussion.
So
None. Ms.
it's
I'm
just
sorry.
a 10-month, or is it just a 6-month term? 7-month term?
I think they go on an annual basis.
They
Okay.
do. They
Okay.
renew every June 30th for most of our committees.
Got it.
Yep. All right. So it was seconded by Ms. Malinowski. Discussion. None. Ms. Braccio.
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski.
Aye.
Mr. Shea.
Aye.
Mr. Stivers.
Aye.
And Mr. Healy is aye. Ms. Liu, now welcome to the ADA committee. And
Thank
we look forward to your service.
Look forward to working with you.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.
All right. And I see in our roster that Mr. Joyner is an attendee, and Vanessa is bringing him over. And this is for a Community Preservation Committee at-large position. This one, it's not a one-year appointment, expiring in June of 2023. Mr. Joyner, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes. Welcome.
Thank you. And thank you for having me.
Was very happy to see your volunteer information. And I'm going to go to Ms. Braccio in just a second after a couple of questions and comments. You were very specific about CPC, and I'm just curious about what is it about that committee that garnered your interest, and what is it you hope to bring to the committee?
Well, two things. The first being in looking at, my wife and I have enjoyed the walks at Breakneck Hill and Chestnut Hill Farm, and the beautifully maintained outdoor space. I attended a seminar there a couple of weeks ago on how the Breakneck Hill is working to promote the preservation of bees. So very interesting in that respect. Second being the charge that the commission has on affordable housing. That's my background. Have been in affordable housing for over 30 years. It's something that our organization looks to promote wherever we can. And so having that charge of the commission piqued my interest to participate. And the third that I said two, but the third is actually Freddie Gillespie is a very convincing person to know. And I met her speaking at the Peace Vigil in June. And she told me to look into it. And the more I looked into it, the more it piqued my interest. So those were the reasons.
Well, those are all very good reasons. And we being the Board of Selectmen, as well as with other boards and commissions, have been having discussions over the last several months about the town of Southborough, what more we can be doing, including involving the CPC and CPA funding in the realm of affordable housing. So I had a feeling that might have been one of the things that piqued your interest, and I'm glad to hear that's the case. And I think I said I was going to go to Ms. Braccio. If I didn't, I'm still going to go to Ms. Braccio.
Thank you. Mr. Joyner, welcome. Thank you so much for stepping forward. Obviously, you haven't had an opportunity to attend CPC meetings, but Freddie would be a very good guide on what takes place. I was really interested in your experience in affordable housing. And can you just touch on that piece a little bit? Because we do have an affordable housing bucket, obviously, through CPC. We also have a SHOPC committee and an affordable housing trust fund committee. So if you could just touch on your experience as to the affordable piece in your background, I would just be interested to hear.
Sure. So as I mentioned, I've been in the field of affordable housing for over 30 years. That my experience has been split almost equally between property management and asset management. Presently, it's in asset management, working for an organization called Trinity Financial. We're a developer slash management company. We're in 4 states. My responsibility is oversight of properties throughout our portfolio. We do a lot of development of low-income housing tax credit properties. You don't see as much development of Section 8 properties these days. The low-income housing tax credit vehicle is the main way affordable housing is created. So we do a lot of that. We're actually do also, we're more and more involved in market rate housing to make the numbers work. So market rate and commercial as well as affordable. I've also been involved quite a bit in advocacy at the state level, but mostly at the federal level. So twice a year through the National Affordable Housing Management Association, or NAMA, we go to DC and speak with legislators to promote the preservation and continued funding of housing. These days, COVID-19 and the CARES Act dominates everyone's view of affordable housing at this point, is keeping people housed and keeping people from getting evicted. Our organization has signed on to a pledge to not evict any of our residents, just to work with them to pair them with aid that is available so that they stay housed. And that's primarily where I've been. I've done some of it on the state level as well. Met with Senator Eldridge in Boston to talk about what's happening at the state level. And he reached out to me after the peace vigil, and I've continued talking with Senator Eldridge as well about what's happening in Massachusetts, the housing bond bill. So it's a combination of actual hands-on management, and the hands-on management I think is critical because we always talk about affordable housing being preserved to its highest and best use. In many communities, affordable housing gets a bad rep of we don't want them in our communities. So we, through our organization and through the NAMA and the New England version of that organization, we promote a high emphasis on ensuring that housing is managed to its highest and best use. So high quality, affordable housing. So the apartment complexes that we own and manage are indistinguishable from the non-affordable apartment complexes in those neighborhoods. And our organization takes real pride in developing really quality market rate looking properties. And we're in, as I mentioned, in 4 states.
Great. Thank you so much. Your knowledge is clearly going to be an asset to the Community Preservation Committee. And I would just like to say thank you for your dedication to affordable housing through all the different avenues you've just described. And I very much look forward to supporting you being on CPC. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, Mr. Joyner. Next up is Ms. Malinowski.
Mr. Joyner, thank you for applying to join CPC. I think your explanation to Lisa was what I was actually interested in. I think CPC is an extremely important committee in town. They're responsible for a large financial aspect to our taxes. And I think affordable housing is one that we as a town and the Board of Selectmen are looking to focus on more, that bucket of money. And so I look forward to supporting your appointment and look forward to working with you from the CPC side. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Shea.
Say that the information Mr. Joyner has shared this evening so far has clearly demonstrated to me that he is eminently qualified for the appointment. I think it's going to be a tremendous addition to the committee, and I look forward to supporting his appointment.
Thank you.
And thank you, Brian. And finally, Mr. Stivers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Joyner, for volunteering. Great background for this. I'm actually pretty excited about this because I've sensed new energy, both from the CPC as well as from our Southborough Housing Opportunity Partnership Committee, SHOPSI, in terms of commitment to actually do something as far as affordable housing is concerned in town. And I think we're behind in some of that. And so I think you can add great skill and energy to that process going forward. And I look forward to accomplishing great things over the next several years with that. So thank you for applying. I certainly support your appointment.
Thank you.
Mr. Joyner, you covered an awful lot of ground with that answer to Ms. Braccio. Either she knows how to ask really good questions, or you know how to give really good answers. But either way, I think you touched upon pretty much anything we would have been interested in hearing from you in the affordable housing area. So
all credit goes to Ms. Braccio.
Fair enough. I am all set. Again, very impressed both with your willingness to do this and also with your background. It seems like a quite a nice fit. So is there a motion?
I make a motion that we appoint David Joyner to the Capital Preservation Committee at-large position expiring June 30th of 2023.
Second.
And seconded by Mr. Shea. Discussion? None. Ms. Braccio.
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski.
Aye.
Mr. Shea.
Aye.
Mr. Stivers.
Aye.
And Mr. Healy is aye. Mr. Joyner, thanks for joining us tonight, and enjoy your time on the CPC.
Thank you so much. I very much appreciate the time that you spent and hearing what you all shared this evening. Thank you.
All right, take care.
You too.
All right, next up is, are we at the chief? We are. Hey, Mr. Purple, before we start with Chief Achilles, I had a very nice conversation today with Tim Norris. But what we were going to have him talk about tonight is not time sensitive. And so is it possible for you to reach out to him while we're starting to hear from Chief Achilles? He gave me his cell phone number. Do you have it?
Yes, no, I have it. I can facilitate that while Chief Achilles is speaking.
Yeah, why don't you do that? Apologize. One thing that's certain about any schedule I set is that it's going to go into disarray, sooner rather than later. But I'll be back to him about setting up another time. And as I said, there's just nothing time sensitive about it. And I'd rather get to these other matters and give them due consideration.
Okay, I'll take care of it right now.
Great. Thanks, Mark. And with that, Chief Achilles, you are muted. That's going to change in a second. Welcome. And you and I had a nice conversation also earlier this week. And I thanked you then, and I thank you now for the materials you sent along. Very helpful. And again, you're going to cover areas beyond those that you and I focused on in our conversation. But this is part of one of our important goals for fiscal year 21 in the Board of Selectmen, and that is focusing on our certainly in the public safety area, but also in the public service area, three primary things, and that is, are we doing everything we can from a hiring perspective to be as to have as broad a reach and inclusive reach as we possibly can. So that's number one. Number two, in our reporting realm, if there are incidents where members of the community, members who, folks who find themselves in Southborough for some reason and come into contact with the fire department. And I don't think we've had very many of these, if any, over the years, but is there a reporting structure to make sure that any issues get raised up through the ranks of the fire department, but also make sure there's a mechanism in place for any issues coming to the attention of the Board of Selectmen. That's number two. And finally, in the training area. And again, as you and I talked about, the fire department, fire personnel is situated differently than the police department, who are very much on the front lines of public safety. But the fire department is a very much a public service entity, and you have unique challenges, and just touch upon your training to make sure that the town of Southborough is being as well served as possible by our fire department and the training that's available to them. So those are the three areas. As I said, I suspect you're going to touch on some other things involving any of those topics as well. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to you. And again, thank you for being here tonight and making yourself available.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you. And I'd like to start off with, the men and the women of the fire department have continued to work hard and dedicate themselves to the community. This year has been a unique and challenging year, which does impact some of the things I'll be talking about. I thought I'd start off just real briefly, talk a little bit about our activity year to date compared to last year, because I know that's come up. A little bit of our initiatives and programs, and then I would start going over the hiring, training, and some of those initiatives and outreach that we talked about. For this year to date, our calls are down surprisingly only about 5% compared to last year this time. We're at 1,025 calls, and last year at this time we were at 1,075. This has come up recently. I've reported to the town administrator and some members of advisory on our ambulance revenue. We saw a decrease trend over the last 3 or 4 months. It really is a representative of a lag. Most reporting on revenues is usually 30 to 90 days out at a minimum. So what we're seeing for revenues coming in now is reflective of some of the impact 2 to 3 months ago. I did reach out to our billing company to get a sense of the trends. I didn't want to just assume it was due to COVID, but it's due to COVID. And let's see here. I just want to read to you a little bit about specifically what we saw is there was a overall decrease in volume of about 75 transports. So not every medical call that we go to represents a transport. Some people don't need to be transported to the hospital. And that's compared to last year, the first 6 months. Medicare is one of our payers, and it continues to be one of the higher payer group that we receive revenue from, and it actually went up 10%. However, private insurance went down. So those are typically commercial payers like Aetna, Tufts, and Cigna. So basically, although our call volume was a little bit down in the transports, some of our payer mix has changed. So I wanted to put that out there because I know revenues, we've been really attentive on appropriate billing practices. And last year, I asked the board to support increasing our rates. We did see some very good numbers earlier in the year. I'm hoping that the trend kind of reverts itself in January and February. I can tell you that the trend is a little bit better. But I thought that was important for the board and the public to know. We do have 22 full-time members of the department, including myself. We also have 7 call members, and I'll speak to that pool of call members as we go through this. Over the last year, again, we've had some challenges in some of our outreach programs and our interactions outside of town, including training, our ability to get out and speak with the public. But I think over the last 6 to 8 months, the board and the public have seen that we've been posting our monthly activity and performance reports on our Facebook page. We also have been trying to communicate that with some of the local media outlets. We've updated our policies and procedures. I've made a concerted effort, and there's been a lot of dedication that we've been able to increase the number of call members. They're technically part-time, and they typically will come from Southborough or a town that connects, and they are very integral in our ability to respond and have some capacity to absorb multiple calls at any one time. So typically, in addition to a couple full-time members, they will respond when we are looking for additional personnel. The last couple of storms we had, and even up until this morning with a couple overlapping calls, they come in and are very dedicated. We started looking at a competency-based and focused training program, both for our current members and anybody we bring on as a new call member or a full-time member. We also working with our medical control, because we're an ambulance service, we have medical direction from one of our hospitals, and she has been extremely dedicated to come and give positive and constructive feedback, meet with the crews, and I can tell you that it's enhancing our ability and improving our ability to provide medical care, because we're getting that constant feedback from our physician. And last, and I sent it, made sure it gets sent forward. Over the last 6 months, we worked on a pretty comprehensive community risk assessment and standard cover document. It was shared and vetted out with a number of stakeholders, including some members of the select board, our department, and members of the public. At some point here, I do want to publish that so that the public, our businesses know what we do, why we do it, and what they can expect from our performance. And it also indicates some areas that we are going to have to monitor that are risks for our ability to cover everybody in the community equally and make sure we have positive outcomes. So pretty comprehensive document. I think a number of you have it, and we'll be sharing that with the public, and at some point try to do more outreach on that program. The areas that I was asked to touch on: hiring. Southborough is kind of a unique position in Metro West. It's not the largest department, and I can tell you it's not the smallest department. When we look to put on members full-time, it typically is a pool from Massachusetts. Sorry, I hit something on my screen, so I'm going to just come back to, there you go. People that apply for our department are typically looking for this size department. They will live within probably half an hour or less of Southborough. So we have a pretty straightforward program of hiring new employees. We're actually, in upcoming months, I foresee possibility of some people leaving the department, so we may be implementing that program again. But it's very formal. You have to meet certain criteria to be considered. Ours aren't as stringent as far as credentials as maybe some other communities, because we understand most of the people that will come here will stay, and we have ability to develop them within the department. So often we will get people that are new to the fire service or emergency medical service. The program starts off with an interview with me, then goes to an oral board. Then after scoring, we value diversity and commitment to the profession. I think that's two things that both the community needs and the department needs. Our diversity probably represents a lot of what our size department and Metro West fire departments look like. I'm proud to say that we have female firefighters and paramedics. And one of the areas that we're fortunate about with the call force, the last 2 members to join the call force were women, both that were Southborough residents. So it gives us an ability, and those that have interest can actually start as a call member or a part-time member, and if an opening comes up, can apply for full-time membership or full-time employment. So we don't often have a vacancy in the full-time, but we're trying to create a robust and diverse call force. And I think within the last year, we've set ourselves on that path to do that. It's unique in the fire service because you do have to meet certain criteria and credentials, both fire and EMS related. And I would say that we are continuing to monitoring opportunities to diversify our workforce even more as they come up. I guess I'll stop there for a quick second unless you want me to keep on going and then answer questions afterwards.
Well, that's a good place in terms of the hiring. Are there, maybe start with Ms. Malinowski. Do you have any questions for the chief in that area?
No, I think I'm good. Thank you.
Mr. Shea?
No questions at this point.
Mr. Stivers?
Okay, at this point, let's keep going.
All right, Ms. Braccio?
No questions at this point either. Thank you.
All right, Chief, you're doing a good job.
All right, thank you.
So far.
So far, so good. Training, I know this, it's kind of twofold. One is in the last budget process, we made a commitment, and I think there was a commitment on part of the select board and the residents that want to make sure that we started to develop our own members professionally. And again, I said in that competency so that we deliver a high quality service. We've been doing that. The challenge this year is a lot of the programs that we would send employees to were either canceled or delayed, or fortunately, some of them went to online versions that were very limited. So I think going forward, that's why we started focusing inward and looked at some of our, like the fire academies and other opportunities to do online training. A number of our members in the last 3 or 4 weeks have been participating in those. Regarding the technical part of our job, I think is pretty easy. It's the other areas that we deal with in the public that become a little more challenging. And we've been very sensitive to behavioral health in the last 6 to 8 months. We've had some correspondence and collaboration with the police department and youth and family services, looking at methods and means to provide education and awareness to our members. That's kind of hit a roadblock just because of the ability to get people in to speak. We're also working with our fire district in opportunities with critical and stress debriefing. And I'm hoping, and we're committed to continue that path once that opens up a little bit more. So I think it's important for the board to know that besides technical training and continuing education and building the competency in what would typically be known as fire and emergency services, we're looking at other areas, and I think they've maybe come to the forefront because of the COVID, I would call it the fallout. Behavioral health, not just within the community, but also within fire and emergency services. So we continue to look at that. We also, the police chief was kind enough to reach out to me. There was opportunities with the minority and diversity groups in town to start getting their feedback, at least, or a dialogue. And that kind of leads to this idea of community risk reduction and interactions and outreach within the community. Most of the time, we think of our outreach as being done from the fire prevention office or into the schools through the SAFE program. As you can tell, that's pretty non-existent right now. And unfortunately, in the spring, we were looking at a whole bunch of opportunities to interact. And I think most of you are aware that I try to get out as much as possible with all the groups in town. And that's been challenging. So there's limited personal access, but now we're starting to reach out with our prevention group. We're also, as I said, we did that community risk assessment. We're looking at new initiatives and new ways to deliver community risk reduction services like fire prevention, injury prevention. But that's going to be a challenge. And I think that will be a challenge throughout the winter until we can get to a point where we can do more one-on-one and group interactions with the community and key stakeholders. One of the things that's, I hope that everybody knows, and is my business card has my cell phone number and my email on it. And most of the time when we have some feedback from the community or a patient or somebody that we've dealt with, it typically immediately, if it's not handled by the duty crew or the duty officer, gets routed to me. And I've made it my mission to try to get back to people within 24 hours of the call or the email. And I think I've been pretty successful. I can tell you that we've had a number of cases where people weren't quite satisfied with the care they were, or the interaction with the fire department. And we've tried to be very responsible and answer their questions and also provide either clarification or background on what was done, why it was done. And then if at the end of the day, they're still not satisfied, what we can do internally to improve that. So I think most of the feedback right now has been positive, but on occasion we get people that are not quite happy with how we're doing things. After this meeting, I'm going to be talking to the Municipal Technology Committee. There was some discussion, and I've used this in the past of customer feedback surveys where we can get an idea how we're doing, and it's another good performance indicator on quality of service. Are we meeting people's needs? And often that will trigger the opportunity for people to reach out and say, well, I completed this feedback, but I really want to talk to you directly. And I think that's the only other way that the department's going to improve or continue to improve and deliver quality services is to get that feedback. Again, these times are going to make it a little more challenging on the method to do that, but I think the technology is there to receive that. So that's your state of your fire department as of today. I would open up to any questions or if you need any clarification on anything I went over.
I've got two things, and then I'm going to go to Mr. Shea to start off. Number one, I think it's terrific to hear that you are looking for ways to involve on the training area and otherwise the sort of resources that Youth and Family Services has and the like. I mean, it just, I'm not a public safety, fire expert by any means, but it's pretty clear that that's one of the focuses in the public safety, public service realm, and that is to figure out ways to bring mental health sensitivity and expertise to the interaction with the public. It's an important thing. It's nice to hear that that's a focus for you folks. And number two, you mentioned there's always going to be situations when in any sort of interactions with the public when there's dissatisfied customers. and I think at least from my perspective as a member of the board, I just want to make sure that internally there's record keeping of that, but also, and we talked with Chief Paulus about doing it, a report, twice a year, of when there are, and I don't even want to say that there are incidents, hopefully there are not incidents, but when there are complaints, expressions of dissatisfaction, whatever record keeping you have in your department to chronicle those, that on a biennial basis, that they get passed along to the Board of Selectmen. And that'll have, multiple benefits, I think, for the town and for the board. And that is, it will make us aware. It'll make us aware that there aren't, or that there's a limited number. But it'll also give us the opportunity to have a more meaningful dialogue about whether or not, we need to step up our game in terms of making additional training, et cetera, available to whether it's the fire department or another department. So figure out a way to do that. I'd encourage you, and maybe if we could, get everyone on the same schedule so that, the 31st of December and the 30th of June, I don't know, every year we're getting reports from the fire department, from the police department, on whether or not there have been any dissatisfied customers that they've encountered in the course of their duties. So that's it for me. I'm going to go to you, Mr. Shea.
Thanks, Marty. And thank you, Chief, for a very, very thorough and excellent presentation. I think picking up on what Marty said, and one of the things that you had said, I think it is important, and it's good to hear, recognition that there wants to be improvement. And if there are areas where the department can improve service and the perceived service to the citizens, that there's an effort in place to take that, to make those moves. I think you've had the disadvantage since you've joined of, there's just a lot of activities that you would have had the opportunity to be seen, to be part of the community, be seen by the people, have been canceled, unfortunately, this year with the pandemic, several last year, even with a lot of evening activities cut short due to the EEE outbreak that we were experiencing at the time. So it's been a challenge from you from that point of view, where you just haven't had as many opportunities as past chiefs have, as Chief Paulus has had in his time here. Hopefully that will change sooner, much sooner rather than later. Because I think it is important. I think that I can sense that desire on your part to be seen by the community, to be part of the community, and I think that's an important step.
Well, thank you. And one thing I think it's important for the board to know is when I started, and Ms. Braccio knows this, there was some, and Mr. Stivers, there was some guidance to stay within so many miles of the town. And as you know, I currently live in Marlborough, and I've tried to come in to the larger scale and complicated incidents off duty. Both my wife and I have spoken in the last month, and we're going to make a commitment to move to town here shortly. So I'm pretty happy about that. And I think that will, it's good for me and my family and my wife, but it's also an opportunity to be a little bit closer, more interactive. I stopped by the voting today. I can't vote, but just to make sure from safety standpoint, but it will be, we're looking forward to being more engaged in the community. So more to follow on that, but that's on the short-term horizon.
Thank you. I'm all set, Marty.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Chief, that's great news, and we'll let us know when it's official, and we'll start pestering you to volunteer for a board or committee. All right, I'm going to go to Mr. Stivers. I'm going to jump off for a second. So when you're done, we'll go directly to Lisa. I'll be back in a second.
Okay, thank you. Chief, thanks for the update. Great report and excellent risk report and cover report there. I thought that was very thorough and great to see that you're thinking that way. I'll reinforce the comments about the importance of integration with behavioral health across police, fire, and other town services. And again, reinforce, I know you have made an effort to get out into the community, and I think that's a huge plus. And so obviously you're on the right track there, and I would encourage that to continue when the pandemic allows here. I do have one question about the report that you had. I saw that we are in the position of providing mutual aid far more than we receive it. Do I recall correctly that we actually get paid for that or
Yes,
not?
so, mutual aid works twofold. One, from the fire department's or from fire services standpoint. So a fire truck going to another town, we do not charge for that, but vice versa. When we require a fire truck from another community to come and assist us, they don't charge us. As far as the ambulance goes, anytime we transport a patient, and of course, if we go out of our community like we did today in Westborough, any transport is an opportunity to build a patient and receive revenue. So that's the good part. And we're poised to be able to provide, because some of our partners around us are a little busier, we often provide mutual aid ambulance to Marlborough and Westborough quite a bit because of their call volume. I would like to note that, and this is true in a lot of the studies I've ever done, you will often provide mutual aid more than you receive it. It's just because we're going to one community going to 8. So we will often go more, and that's typically a trend. But as you stated, there is some benefit to doing that because it's a revenue generator on occasion.
Is it worth thinking about trying to work a deal on the ambulance service with other towns that may be under capacity in terms of ambulance capacity to say, send us all your calls as a first priority. We'll work hard to support you, or does that happen just based on available capacity at the moment?
I think it happens on available capacity, and I caution it's not, and we could look at it, but I caution if we start increasing our activity and call volume, that will have some direct impact on our ability to cover our own calls. So I think it's something to pay attention, but we're fortunate that we have a great relationship with our mutual aid partners, and I think the quality of services we deliver and our reliability, we're being used probably to the correct level right now.
Okay, thanks very much. And again, obviously need to continue to focus on the hiring process and work to find a more diverse population coming into the system through the call activity, which is a great way to develop people. Unfortunately, that's not a quick way probably to make that happen, but whatever we can do to accelerate that process would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Braccio.
Good evening, Chief. Thank you. Welcome. As always, I had actually reached out to the chief prior to the meeting, and I had majority of my questions answered. So other than to say we look forward to you coming to town, and Mrs. Achilles could definitely find a wonderful committee to serve on while she's here, because you'll be so busy going to calls. Again, the opportunity presents itself. So as always, thank you for being involved in the community and always wanting to do that and put yourself front and center with the public. So thank you.
Thank you.
Chief, one of our goals for fiscal year 21 was to be more aggressive in our outreach for volunteers, and you're feeling the brunt of that tonight.
Well, we're going to use that because we need more. We could use some more. That's not technically a volunteer, but anybody I see that considers being an emergency medical technician, maybe not a firefighter, should consider joining the call force. And I know Ms. Braccio is very involved with it, but there is a citizen emergency response team that you don't have to be a paramedic or a firefighter, but that's another good way to join and serve your community. Sometimes you get to do some fun stuff or exciting stuff when the weather's bad or there's an emergency or somebody lost, but we're trying to reinvigorate that also in the community.
All right, now we're going to go to
Chief.
Ms. Malinowski.
Oh,
Whoops,
can I
I'm
just-
sorry, Lisa.
I
Yeah.
just said one final thing. Chief, you made me look bad that I didn't plug CERT, that you did. So to any CERT members that are watching, I apologize. Thank you.
All right, Chelsea.
Okay, thanks, Chief, and thanks for your presentation. I just have two follow-up questions for you. The physician feedback that you talked about, is that a contracted service that we pay for to get that feedback? And is that a physician is evaluating the care on the transport to the hospital, or can you kind of elaborate on what that piece is?
We do have agreements with UMass Medical, and they provide medical direction. And I would have to double check it, what if any fees we pay for that. But typically, in my experience, and I think in Southborough Fire Department's experience, sometimes you have a very active and engaged medical director, and sometimes you just have one on paper. Emily Kumo, younger physician with a very strong emergency medicine background. I think she lives maybe 1 or 2 towns away. She's extremely engaged, has been and has reached out. In addition to just providing medical direction on things we could be doing, she has introduced that she is giving. We probably get 6 or 8 emails from her a week, just looking at small things that we can do better. She's also evaluated some of our protocols to make sure we're doing it right and more efficiently with less errors. She's actually ridden on the ambulance a couple times and has responded with us. You don't see that in a medical director. That's like the old school days. I think it's new for our members to have consistent feedback. And I think that's a paradigm shift to when you heard from the medical director, it usually was you did something wrong. And now it's you're doing something right. So having a strong medical director and a very active will allow our paramedics and EMTs to provide better care, start thinking of new and emerging treatment modalities that we might be able to employ. And also, I think that the select board and the community can know that we're not just making up as long as we go along. We actually have oversight, and I think that will improve the quality of care that we get. So I think we're in much better shape with this new approach, and we're very pleased with this medical director.
That's great. Thank you. And my second question is on the 2 types of training, the technical training and then the professional training. Are you seeing more opportunities for professional training for your staff?
Actually, no. When we embarked, once we hit April, most of the professional training opportunities, whether it was higher education, the Department of Fire Services, and the National Fire Academy, and even a number of colleges, really scaled back their, I would call them enrichment or enhancement programs, and really started to focus on very core basic programs. So that's when we looked internally and said, how can we build a competency-based training program internally that has benchmarks and references they have to meet. So it would be nice to hybrid them and put them together. I have a number of members that are starting to look at higher education and degrees, and some of the online National Academy professional development programs are starting to come out now. I think they figured a way to do a Zoom course that is effective. So I'm hoping by when we get to the spring that we actually can dovetail both of them together and hopefully get a little more synergy between the two, and kind of, I have a direction where I'd like to go to, and I just think it's going to take a little bit longer.
Okay, thank you. I'm all
All right, thanks, Chelsea. I thought for sure you were going to let me put a check mark on my goals sheet for the regional dispatch. I thought for sure you were going to ask the chief a question about that, but it remains blank till the next
I was
meeting.
going to give it in member. I was going to do it in member reports. I can do it now if you want.
The member report is fine. We can let the chief get going. Chief, the one terrific. Thank you very much. This is all good news, all good information we've heard from you. The one thing I might suggest is Ms. Hale has been very active, very helpful in sort of strategies for in the hiring context for sort of creative ways to reach out to communities, to potential applicant buckets that we haven't looked at in the past. And so you might touch base with Vanessa and maybe just have a chat with her about ways she's done it with respect to some other departments and other hiring.
Perfect, and I will.
All right, terrific. All right, with that, Chief, we thank you very much, and we'll see you again soon.
Well, thank you very much, and if there's anything you need, let me know.
All right, thanks, Chief. Mr. Purple, I'm going to ask you, were you able to get a hold of Mr. Norris?
I was. He will bill us accordingly, and he will wait to hear on the rescheduled date.
All right, I'll follow up. I'll touch base with him tomorrow, and it's all my fault. So I'm happy to take the blame. And I think this also should give us a little bit more flexibility in our discussion with the personnel board, who should be up next.
Excuse me, Marty?
Yes.
Oh, okay, no, never mind. I see Vanessa's doing it. I was going to ask if we were going to bring all their members over so they could open their meeting. Call their meeting to order, but I see Vanessa's already doing it, so never mind. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, I saw all of them queued up in the attendees. I figured they'd be here soon. Betsy, are you there? Ms. Jasinski is. Hi, Dorian. Mr. Rubenstein, hello?
Jeff? Can you hear me, Marty?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I just unmuted. Either
All
that
right.
or I was going to have to grab one of my kids.
All right. Do you need to do something to convene your meeting? Have you done it at another venue?
No, we were not given a Zoom meeting of our own. We noticed the meeting, so I can call it to order if you like.
Yeah, sure. Why don't you do that?
Okay, and then I presume if you've already read into the record about the governor's order and Zoom participation. Can we get grandfathered in under that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Betsy Rosenblum, Chair of the Personnel Board, calling the Personnel Board meeting to order. This is a virtual meeting of the Personnel Board via Zoom, virtual joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen via Zoom for Tuesday, October 20th, 2020, called to order at 7:30. Thank you. I don't know, I can't see who's participating, so I don't know which board members are here. I just have a visual on Marty.
Okay. We have Ms. Jasinski, Mr. Nixon. I'm looking through Mr. Rubenstein.
Mr. Rubenstein is also present.
Yeah, so I think it may be 4, yourself included, Betsy.
Mr. Dietz told me he, long story short, he's not going to make it tonight.
Okay.
Is it possible for me to see the participants on my screen, Vanessa?
Yep, I think if you go to the gallery view on your screen, you should be able to see everybody.
I don't know. Hang on one second. I'm just going to get some assistance.
Okay.
I was going to say, how old are your kids? Get that? That's what I'm doing at this point. I'm reaching out to whichever one of them happens to be home and getting them to take care of the technology for me.
Yeah, because I'll end up disconnecting myself. So just one moment. Sorry.
That's okay.
Can you show me how to do a gallery view? Yeah, we are live. you do that?
And I would say that all kids who are helping out, I'll remind them of an 11-hour-a-week position that the town has in the IT department.
For a low rate of pay.
It is. My kids have gone through various stages of helping me out. And at this point, it's just sadness in their eyes when they have to do it again. It's just, they realize that I'm just not going to advance, and they're sad about it.
Same question, 50th time.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. I just have to put in a plug for my daughter, who just graduated with a degree in computer engineering from Northeastern University.
Wow.
Tells me I can only see 4 people at a time because I am on a tablet.
Oh, well, we can see you now.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody.
All right. So let me just do a quick lead in. Betsy and I had a conversation, was it last week or this week? I think it was last week.
Friday morning.
Friday morning, and touch base briefly about what some of the areas we're going to cover today. And I told her that the order I would go in was to lead first with the salary administration plan work and the information that you folks have provided, which is comprehensive, makes an awful lot of sense about the way you're approaching salary administration. So do you want to just touch on that for a second? There may be some questions about it. Again, I found it very helpful and self-explanatory, but explain just how you folks are going about your evaluations and the like in that area.
Sure. You want me to speak, Marty?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Please.
So Mr. Purple contacted us, I think it was October 1st, regarding scheduling the joint meeting, ran through the topics that you folks wanted to touch on. We actually ended up having a meeting on October 14th where we added a few of our own. But Mr. Purple told us that you'd want to discuss the annual adjustment. This is something that traditionally the board has done. It predates me. In the last couple of years since I've been chair, we try to get as broad a range of data as, within reason. And I have to thank Mr. Ballantyne. He comes in every year with data, Ms. Hale as well. And I think Ms. Hale is having, so basically the data, the list is in the packet. It's number 10. I don't know what the number is in your packet. It says Bates 10 on it, annual salary adjustment factors considered. It's got that number from the clerk's office because it was in our packet. So you can see the last couple of years, we get some external data, we get internal data. We have most of it together. If we don't have it, it's because Vanessa tells us it's too early to have it and everybody's in the same boat. So the data is in the packet. I don't really have more to say than that. I think last year, Mr. Healy, you were on the board when we came to see you. We had last year's joint meeting was October 15th, 2019, and we discussed with the Board of Selectmen what kinds of things they would like to see. And I think the sense of the Board of Selectmen was the materials we were looking at made sense to you as well as us. So we repeated it again this year. And again, many thanks to Mr. Ballantyne for pulling together this data for us that's in the packet. And I don't have anything else right now on that topic.
Okay, well, it still makes sense to me.
Okay.
And so, but let me see, and maybe we can just do it by, if instead of going around, if any members of the board have any questions or comments about this particular area. No, I suspected that might be the case. So the second one I told you I'd go in order would be the training, and it's.
Oh, Marty, can I just add one thing?
Sure.
So there's a new piece. If you look at page 10 at the bottom, there is a new piece this year. I added a number 4, any special circumstances due to COVID-19. Obviously, we're in a whole new world. We have some town buildings that are closed, services affected. So I did throw this out to Mr. Purple to ask him if there was anything that he and his team at Town Hall thought the Personnel Board ought to know. An issue comes up every year in terms of parity with the unions. And we also have the managers who have contracts. If any of their raises are being reconsidered in light of COVID, then that would affect what we do with the SAP employees. If we're not in a position where anyone is talking about changes to the other employees, you know, I don't speak for the board. We haven't really had a substantive discussion on the adjustment. But just in terms of whether or not you guys are thinking about anything in terms of the new world that we're in terms of salaries, and we would want to know that. And I think Mark said nothing at this time. As of October, he didn't have anything. So.
Yeah, actually, that's a very good point, though. That's and I will confess that's not something that I have focused on. But it is an interesting question about whether or not it should and has had an impact in that area. So thanks for putting that on our radar screen. Yeah, Ms. Malinowski?
Can I just ask a question? So Betsy, on that point, 3B, does that mean that if we're talking about a level funded budget, that if we were to have a 2.5% SAP salary increase, that would result in a 1% overall budget increase, and therefore that would negate a level funded budget if that's what we were trying to do?
Chelsea, Ms. Malinowski, great question, and I'm glad you asked, because 3B does not mean that, but it could be confusing. Okay. And actually, there is nothing in the packet. Mr. Ballantyne got me 3B supplementary, I think it was the day before, so my bad, I didn't add that to the packet. What that means is every year we ask Mr. Ballantyne if we give a 1% raise or a 2% or a 3% raise to the SAP employees. So we're looking at the SAP payroll aggregate. Okay, how much will it cost the town in dollars?
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes we might be between a 2% and a 2.25%, or 2.25% or 2.5%, and we're really agonizing. And we wanted to know just what are we talking about? So for this year, Mr. Ballantyne reported to us that for each 1% increment, so all the SAP employees get a 1% raise, it will cost the town $29,000. So if we give a 2% raise to all SAP employees, it will cost the town 2 times $29,000.
Got it.
3% raise, got it. It has nothing to do when you folks start talking about level funded or 1% or 2% or 3%. And it's a great question, and I'm sorry I didn't clarify that. And thank you for asking.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is in the training area. And we just got done a conversation with Chief Achilles. You might have heard some of that if you were in the waiting room.
I did. Thanks.
Yeah, you know, one of our goals, one of our initiatives for fiscal year 21 is to both think about and hopefully, certainly potentially act on you know, issues of equity, inclusivity, and the like. And we've had direct conversations with our police chief and now with our fire chief about what sort of training they are doing, you know, and also in other areas, reporting areas and the like, and hiring. But particularly, and it's not, obviously, we're not asking you to decide something tonight or even have any specific notions, but more generally, do you see the personnel board as having a role, and what would that role be in putting together the outlines of programs that address those sort of training issues? And again, I don't think it necessarily would impact the police and fire. I just think that they are you know, in unique places, but more generally for town employees, training areas, again, having to do with inclusivity, equity, whether or not there are you know, public service issues in terms of the interaction that folks have with the public. So I'm not asking if you have had any discussions or like about that, but whether or not you think the personnel board has a role in that area and what that role might be.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Healy. So Mr. Purple had told us back on October 1st, and he also participated in the personnel board meeting. He attended the meeting on October 14th. And I saw that you had included employee training, but we were given no clue as to what that was about. And it was during our phone call last Friday that I learned that this was your specific focus. So if I will, I'll just refer to it as DEI training, diversity, equity, and inclusion for shorthand. So after we spoke, Mr. Healy, I just Googled diversity, equity, and inclusion training because I've had no experience in the background. And I got 181 million search results. So I obviously don't have a handle on the topic. I will tell you, as far as employee training is concerned, Personnel Board does fund employee training. We have $3,200 in our FY21 budget for personnel training. And the way it has worked in the past, Ms. Hale has been helpful. She surveys department heads and comes to us with a list of the types of trainings that department heads think would be helpful for their employees. And because I didn't know exactly where the focus was going to be, I had asked Vanessa to pull together a memo of some of the trainings we've done in the past 3 years. So we did some GIS training, we did Excel training, but basically what we do to maximize taxpayer dollars, because our mission, as stated in the SAP, is to serve the taxpayers and the employees. So we try to do training that will have the broadest base of employees who would benefit from it. And in fact, last year, Ms. Hale brought us a request from, I think it was Mr. Laflamme in the IT department. He had noted a need on behalf of certain departments for GIS training. And I actually surveyed, I think, 19 department heads to find out if GIS training would be of use to them. And we did in fact fund GIS training. And another area where we have funded training in the past is managers doing performance reviews. We had a training in 2018 on performance reviews. And since we adopted the new performance tool, we had a training in February. Oh, the good old days at the Public Safety Building. Ms. Hale, Mr. Purple were there. I think by all accounts, we thought it was a terrific training. We were actually going to hire the man to do a second training for boards and committees who have SAP employees. And that unfortunately was cut short by COVID. So you are correct, Mr. Healy. We haven't had a discussion about DEI training. I don't know that my board has the resources to become the DEI experts, but if you, and in concert with the folks that you work with, wanted to come to us and have a dialogue, if you have found a training that you thought was worthwhile, we would certainly be happy to take a look at it and partner with you by funding it. But I don't think that we have the expertise or the resources. I will note, under the Massachusetts Equal Protection Act, under the statute, the personnel bylaw, the Personnel Board has an obligation to review the classification and salaries every 4 years. We're due for that this year. So one of the things we put on our agenda was to update you on the quadrennial. We call it the quadrennial review because it's every 4 years. But we will be doing a salary review this year in concert with the town hall, with Ms. Hale and Ms. Pasicane, to make sure that we are all in line for equity under the Massachusetts Equal Protection Act. So that's one aspect of, arguably, of DEI, making sure that we're paying men and women the same. So that is definitely one of the things on our plate for this year. That said, Personnel Board is open to anybody who has a personnel concern. Training is one of the things that we do. So feel free to come to us and discuss training opportunities that you would like funded. We have $3,200 in the kitty that has not been spent. And if anybody else on my board would like to, I'm doing all the talking. If anyone else on my board who's present has anything they want to say about DEI or other training, please feel free.
Wide range of training, as Betsy said, and for us, I think it's a matter of identifying what is it we're trying to accomplish with the training? I mean, that for me is the first step. In terms of procedure, what we've done with training in the past is we work with Vanessa in figuring out, okay, who are the people who provide this training? And one of us may work with Vanessa in figuring out who the best person is, making a recommendation to the board, and the board will then decide what to do. But I think before we just say we want to do this kind of training, we have to think about what are we trying to achieve with the training. And once we do that, I think we can go through the normal steps that we go through.
Thank you, Mr. Rubenstein.
Yeah, and I'll just say on that, and then I'll see if anybody and anybody else on our board has any questions or comments in this area. It is, I know I'm struggling in this area because it's not something that has been a focus, I don't think, of very many communities in terms of training that they offer and organize. And so I don't think we're flailing, but by the same token, we don't have a lot of experience in this area. It's not training that the town of Southborough has offered in the past, but getting ahead of the curve is usually a good thing, and that's one of the things we're trying to do in all of these areas. So with that little statement by me, anybody else have anything they want to weigh in on this area? Thoughts?
Marty, if I could just add one thought that had come to me after we spoke. Maybe this is something we tried to explore with Mr. Laflamme with the GIS training, because that was a little bit costly. It didn't work out despite Tom's best efforts, no fault of his. But maybe with some of the connections we have at Town Hall with other municipalities, I feel bad. I'm always looking at Vanessa at these meetings, so I'm always asking her to do things. You need to get somebody else or put up a blank screen, Vanessa. With some of the connections that we have, if it would be possible maybe to join with some other municipalities, as Mr. Healy says, everybody's looking at this. Maybe hire a firm to do training for, I don't know if you're looking at hiring managers or everybody. I really don't know what your focus is going to be. Maybe possible to regionalize our DEI training. Maybe through the Mass Municipal Association, we can get some resources and maybe join with a few other towns and share the cost. I just throw that out.
No, good thoughts. Anyone else on the board? Ms. Braccio.
Just one question. Betsy, thank you so far for everything you've presented. Can you just, and maybe I missed this when you spoke, and I apologize if I did, the quadrennial review that you do, so that's for checking for equity and payroll. Is that statute driven? And you may have said that and I may have missed that, Betsy. And again, I apologize if I did. Can you just,
No problem, Ms. Braccio. It's late and I have a lot of information and I'm talking probably too fast. So if you look at the personnel bylaw, also known as the SAP, it says under section 16E, the personnel board shall from time to time, but no less often than every federal election year, hence the term quadrennial review. And that was told to us by Tim Norris, a special labor counsel. He called it the quadrennial review. We all looked at each other and said, what the heck is that? And he said 16E, because it's every 4 years. Okay. Personnel board is obligated to look at the entire classification system and the salary schedules. So we were due for such a review this year. And at the same time, a couple of years ago, we became aware of something called the Massachusetts Equal Pay Act, which is a state law that talks about equity vis-a-vis gender. That's the focus of it, pay equity. So when my board met to discuss what we wanted to do to fulfill our obligation under 16E, we discussed it and we had this discussion with Mr. Purple and Ms. Hale. One of the defenses to a suit under the Massachusetts Equal Pay Act is that you have done a salary survey and looked at whether or not you have issues in your town. And I hate to sound like an attorney, but I am, and we have another attorney on the personnel board. We thought rather than just do a salary study as we've done it in the past. Why not try to make it a study that would satisfy MEPA as well? And then we had some discussions about what that would be. We considered hiring a consultant, but then given the budget situation, what we arrived at was we have the salary data. We know the positions of the SAP employees. Ms. Hale and Ms. Pasakane can look at that roster. They see anything, turn it over to the attorney. Then it becomes privileged and he can review it. And we actually did have a nice discussion with Attorney Norris. He was in to see us about a couple of SAP matters. And we decided it would be prudent, the Personnel Board decided it would be prudent on behalf of the taxpayers. We've spent some money on consultants in the last 5 to 10 years, and we thought maybe this was something we could bring in-house. And Ms. Hale, and I think probably Mr. Ballantyne agreed on behalf of Ms. Pasakane. We have the salary data, pull it together. The sense of everybody was we probably don't have gender equity issues in the system. The type of thing you would be looking for is, say you had X number, many people in the same position, and obviously you were paying the men more than the women. A cursory look, Vanessa, feel free to chime in. We don't think we have that type of issue, but the women will pull that together, and then we will send it over to Attorney Norris, who is conversant with the MEPA, the Massachusetts Equal Pay Act, and he will let you know if we have any issues. And that, of course, would be a confidential attorney-client privilege type of thing. So I think I've covered it. Vanessa, Mark, if you have anything to add, they were part of these discussions. They were all done in open meeting.
Oh, that's good,
Did I
Betsy.
answer the
Thank you.
question, Ms. Braccio?
You did. Thank you very much. And I appreciate the process that you included with it. Thank you.
Okay.
I don't see any other hands raised. Oh, Mr. Stivers, did you just unmute?
I've been on mute. Actually, I do have a quick question if I can, please. I'm interested in the process here in terms of how we get some of this done. And I'm struck by the fact that $3,600 is a pretty small amount of money for training, where I think we probably have a lot of upside in terms of doing training. But it's interesting to me that as I read the town administrator bylaw, looks like Mr. Purple works for the Personnel Board, which I actually think is a good thing from the standpoint of sort of checks and balances and separation of powers. But with guidance and oversight from the Personnel Board, it says town administrator is responsible for development and implementation of training programs. And it makes me wonder, should the budget for that come out of the Selectmen's budget or some other budget versus Personnel Board? So the Personnel Board could be sort of the manager, director, et cetera, of the process. And then Board of Selectmen staff provides the resources for the actual training program somehow. I mean, again, it gets a little messy sometimes when you cross organizational boundaries like that, but at least that's what it looks like to me is the intent of the town administrator bylaw. So I don't want to throw a wrench into the process, but I think it's interesting to sort out how we might be able to find more resources and arms and legs to make some of this happen going forward.
So I think one of the things, I was waiting for Mrs. Hale to jump in, but I'll take the first crack at it. You know, it isn't a lot of money, Sam. And, you know, sometimes we find ourselves simply focusing on, and I think Betsy put it very well, those type of trainings that benefit the most employees. So, you know, Vanessa would, you know, probably talk about, you know, our sexual harassment trainings and you know, some of those things that we should be doing more routinely. I know that, you know, the one thing we try to take advantage of, and I can let Vanessa speak to the details, through the town's insurance company. You know, we do get trainings through the insurance company from various vendors that they employ. Those trainings are usually free. And we try to take advantage of those, you know, as much as we can. And funny enough, you know, there's discussions on diversity and everything are really dominating conversations right now. And so Vanessa had reached out to our insurance company saying, well, what have you got for diversity? What have you got for this? And they said, well, we've got this program we're putting together and we're working on this. And they're doing it in conjunction with the Mass Municipal Association, which obviously is the partner arm of the Mass Interlocal Insurance Association. And but they don't have it up and running yet. So these things are still, even though the conversations are dominating, on this topic right now, if we're looking for something free and available through some of the channels that Mrs. Hale, uses for training, we're going to be waiting a little while. This is going to be something we're probably going to have to pay for.
And Mark, I guess I would suggest another dimension for that. I've some of the same issue in my day job, and I think one dimension is, of course, what can you do that helps the greatest number of people in terms of particular need. But the other one is focusing on which of your employee base actually has a particularly urgent, significant need.
Mhm.
And so it may be that there are certain areas or certain profiles of people who may need a particular focus in terms of diversity, inclusion, et cetera. And it may be a fairly small number of people, but it doesn't mean that they deserve any less focus because it's an important issue to focus on. So I think you got to combine both of those dimensions to make sure you're devoting appropriate resources to this. And maybe you get down to the point of granularity where you got programs for one or two people who happen to be important people in that process. Somehow, maybe people making hiring decisions, for example, that you really want to shore up as far as making sure they are thinking the right way, looking at the problem the right way, et cetera, and have the skills to do the right kind of things, even though it's not a large population, critical in terms of reinforcing the objectives we have for diversity, inclusiveness, et cetera. So no easy answer, but I think that's an interesting dimension.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just comment a little
Yeah,
bit?
Vanessa, sure.
Sure. So thank you, Mr. Stivers. The hiring in the speaking with our department managers is one area I think is probably first on the list. I've been talking this past week or two with some of our municipal consultants that work with many of our cities and towns in Massachusetts about what they're doing and what they have to offer in this area. As Mr. Purple mentioned, our insurance company at Maya is, does not have anything ready to deploy right now. They're working on that. Some of the other consultants do have some options available, but many communities are struggling right now because they would prefer to do this kind of training in person. So, they're trying to determine, do we want to just go ahead and do some of these webinars and seminars over Zoom because it's important to get it out, get the content out there, or are we going to wait a little bit longer and try and do something face-to-face? I think the face-to-face is a long way off. So I'm really looking for something that can be deployed in a virtual format. Again, just a point about Maya, our insurance company, as Mark mentioned, many of the webinars that we attend or face-to-face trainings in the past, of course, that we were sending our employees to were free. So that's great. I'm always looking for something that's fiscally frugal that we might not need to pay for or might pay a very low rate to. I think that's, also developing this year. But I also wanted to note the more that we use our insurance company, it's under their loss control program that we get credits for sending employees to their seminars. So at the end of the year, in most fiscal years, we're looking at a $10,000 to $15,000 discount on our annual insurance premium. So we always look to Maya first because number one, they're usually free, and number two, there's a huge discount for us, in the following fiscal year. So they might be worth the wait in some cases, but I actually have a call tomorrow with one of our consultants who is trying to deploy something very soon, again, in a virtual format. So we hope to have more information within the next few days.
Yeah, and that's good to rely on the insurance loss prevention folks. I use that myself. On the other hand, I sometimes have to remind myself that free is good, but effective is better.
Thank you. Yes.
I'll keep that in mind, I guess.
All right. Leads us to third topic, which is the intersection. And your question or comment, Mr. Stivers, was a good segue between the personnel board and its governing structure and the town administrator. And obviously there is some, again, intersecting, maybe even some overlap of responsibilities. And Betsy, are there some particular areas you want to touch on?
Thank you, Mr. Healy. This will be my fourth joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen. I think, Ms. Braccio, you've been present for all of them. And the topic of the roles and responsibilities of the Personnel Director and the Personnel Board was, I discussed it at length in December of 2018. We arrived at, well, there's no nice way to say it. We didn't arrive at any conclusions or answers. I think the majority of the Board of Selectmen, they were very generous with their time. They listened to my comments. I read a lengthy statement detailing what I thought the issues were. And the consensus of the Board of Selectmen is that I should hire an attorney to tell us who does what. So, and at the end of all that discussion, I said, I'm sorry, folks, if you think more lawyers is the answer, I'm not doing my job very well. We're blessed to have an attorney of experience on the Personnel Board, and now we have a very competent attorney on the Board of Selectmen. So the first thing I'd like to say, and I do want to say the words are mine, but I do speak for my board. They're a terrific board. They're a great group. They're all volunteers with professional experience who give a lot of their time. And through the years, I think we've been together, some of us for 2 years now, for 3. I'm going into my 4th year. I do speak for them. Of course, when I'm done with my comments, they can, of course, speak for themselves. But I speak with the confidence of my board that the issues that I noted 2 years ago have not been resolved. And I'm sorry to say that. I have a list of grievances, but the hour is late and life is short. And as I was listening to the first 2 hours of your meeting, I was thinking, how can I try to make this effective for my board, but easier for everybody? I don't think anybody wants to listen to my list of petitions and grievances. I don't know what time it is, but we've got to be going into your 5th hour or something like that. It's the sense of my board that we have 2 governing statutes. We have the personnel bylaw, the SAP, talks about the role of the personnel board, and we have the town administrator bylaw. For those who may be listening, that is Chapter 27, Article 9 of the town code. SAP has been around in one form or another for a long, long time. It gets added to and changed at town meeting. The town administrator bylaw was adopted by the town at the annual town meeting on April 8, 2013. It can be found in the town code at Chapter 27. Very briefly, they do overlap somewhat, but I don't think the problem is in the statutes, and my board doesn't think the problem is in the statutes. At the end of the day, the town administrator bylaw says when the town administrator is wearing his personnel director hat, he works with the guidance and oversight of the personnel board. And everyone on my board has agreed, and it's no secret, that we do not feel this is happening. I have about 24, I got a notebook with 24 examples of the dysfunction, for lack of a better word, the dysfunction in the relationship, despite my best efforts over the last 3 years. But I don't think it serves at this late hour to go through the whole list. If any of the Board of Selectmen need to be convinced, I'll be happy to sit and list a list of petitions and grievances. So as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking maybe the answer is, because I don't think my board is getting where it needs to go with the personnel director in terms of working out the details of the relationship. There are just too many times, too many things, too many policies, too many decisions that invoke the SAP. I'll give you just one example within the last 6 months that you will all relate to. The Board of Selectmen was debating a draft COVID policy. Representations were made to your board that it did not implicate SAP in any way. Thankfully, Ms. Braccio understood otherwise and wanted to hear from my board. In the opinion of my board, it clearly did overlap with the SAP. And it was referred to us, thank you, Ms. Braccio. We took it very seriously. My board takes all of this seriously. Worked hard, reviewed it, and gave a draft back to you with our comments. This is the tip of the iceberg of things that do not come our way. There's a policy pertaining to benefits from November 2016. that implicates SAP part-time employees and limits their benefits. But because it doesn't have the word part-time in it, I'm told it's not the business of the board was told it was not our business, even though it clearly delineates between employees 19.5 hours and those working more than 35 hours. Like I said, I don't really want to go through the whole list. I think where I'm coming out on this, and I believe that the board would support it, if a representative of the Board of Selectmen wanted to sit down with a representative of the Personnel Board, probably would be me, and Mr. Purple, and see if reasonable people in good faith can sit down with the two statutes and for once and for all talk about who does what and when the Personnel Board should be consulted, and how the Personnel Director should act in relation to the Personnel Board and what our guidance and oversight means. I think that would be a grand idea. And then we could get on with we all have a lot of work to do, but I got to be frank with you folks. I do 85% of it, and I have spent the last 3 years chasing information. There's just, anyway, I'll stop there. I'm a volunteer. The rest of my board is volunteers. If you feel the frustration in my voice, this is 3 years of not being where I think we can be, and I know we can do better. And it's not fair to my board, it's not fair to me, but moreover, it's not fair to the taxpayers, and it's not fair to the employees. My mission isn't supposed to be to chase around and get information. It's to do the people's business. And the lack of communication, the lack of respect is impairing the ability of my board to do its job. And it's a big topic, and I'm really sorry to be such a bummer at this late hour. But again, if I'm not part of the solution, I'm part of the problem. And this is not just me, folks. This is my entire board. And we've been around and around with it. And I think maybe a sit down is the best way to go. And I'll be done there. Thanks for listening.
All right, well, I'm going to get some comments and see if there's any questions. The one thing I'll say, when you and I spoke on Friday, and it's sort of interesting, we have a slightly different, and I was careful with my language today, and I said intersection when we spoke on Friday. Again, you know, the older I get, the more I dislike any statute or bylaw that I didn't write, I mean, I think that there's some unfortunate tension between the personnel board bylaw and the town administrator bylaw. I mean, they were written at different times. I don't think that they were written with one eye on the other and the like. That being said, we've got existing bylaws in both areas. We've got a personnel board, we've got a town administrator, and you know, this is the discussion. We got to figure out how to make sure that we're getting all of this stuff right. So whether or not it's your suggestion of having somebody from the Board of Selectmen, and we can talk about that, and we don't even have to talk about it tonight. But I think some of the issue is as I said, what I think is real tension between the bylaws, the documents. That being said, you know, tension has to be gotten past, and so that we're doing things the right way, or is it at least as much the right way as we possibly can. So I guess those are my thoughts generally. I don't have any good ideas for how to broach some of the issues that have been brought up, and you know, whether or not we even see them as significant issues. And you know, making sure that we're functioning properly, to me, is always a significant issue. So, but those are my thoughts. Anyone else on the board want to weigh in? Ms. Braccio?
I think it might be appropriate to see if anybody from, we're the petitioner with the joint meeting. Maybe if we could hear if anybody else on personnel. I probably covered it all, but if anybody on my board has anything, I said my piece. I'd like them before you guys respond, to see if anybody else on my board
Oh,
want-
that's fine. You have to speak quickly or forever hold your peace, because I'll start talking immediately. So if there's somebody else on the personnel board who wants to weigh in, happy to hear.
I'll just say briefly, and Betsy has spelled it out pretty clearly. And I don't know, like you, I would have written the statutes differently. I think there are areas of overlap, if you will, between them that should be rectified. But I don't feel that's the source of the problem. And I don't know, but my sense is part of it is the board under Betsy's leadership, I think, has been more of an activist board than maybe the personnel board was in the past. And I don't mean to in any way disrespect what they did, but I think we're doing things somewhat differently. And I think it presents a challenge in terms of how the town administrator was used to doing things to how we want to do things. I think that's part of it. And that's why I think a dialogue, maybe we can work this out. I think people are trying to work in good faith, but they just have a different idea of what that means.
Marty. So I agree with Betsy. I also agree with Barry. We could probably work the two bylaws a little bit. I don't believe that's the issue. I think the best idea is to actually sit down and have a heart-to-heart talk. I think there's maybe some personality issues going on in here. One of the biggest things right now that I have an issue with, and I would like to ask Mr. Purple to please, when he joins our meetings, to actually sit there and look at a black screen with Mark Purple across there for the entire meeting and not see him in person, I find insulting.
Dorianne, I'm gonna.
There or not, we don't know. So I would just encourage him. He's probably there. He's doing other stuff, but I would like to see him in our meeting. So I would encourage him to just join us in person, like we're all doing tonight.
Okay.
That might help.
All right. Is that it? All right. Now I'm going to go to you, Ms. Braccio.
Thank you. Again, Betsy and personnel board, thank you for coming. Thank you for bringing your concerns forth. I think you summed it up best, Betsy, that it's a lack of communication on some level. And I think it behooves us, as members of the Board of Selectmen to make sure the conversation takes place, that sometimes it's just a matter of sitting down and an interpretation of something that's happening or is done, can be resolved. I hear your frustration. I want you to know that, from all of you that are here, we hear your frustration. Let me say that. I think we all hear your frustration. I don't have an answer to the path of how best to get there, Betsy, and balance of the board. But I think certainly a conversation, and this is a starting conversation, and it's a starting point. And I hope that, we can work together from here to move forward, to work positively together. And as Betsy, as you say, do the people's business. So again, that's my suggestion. Have the conversation. Thank you.
Ms. Malinowski?
I would
Yes,
add,
no?
it's not, I
Hold on,
appreciate
Betsy,
all
hold
the
on,
comments.
Betsy, hold on. I'm going to go through our board.
Great.
Okay, thank you, Betsy and the personnel board. I also hear what you're saying, and I think it's the Board of Selectmen's responsibility to listen to your concerns and address things that you're saying have not been addressed for the last 2 years. And I do think it would make sense for us to have a sit down and figure out where the challenges are and figure out that we can work collaboratively together, because we all have things that we need to get done and we want to be the most effective that we can with the time that we have, right? Because we all have lives and other jobs and responsibilities, and we don't want to be wasting your time. And I think Mr. Rubenstein's comments about how Personnel Board has kind of stepped up what they've been doing over the last few years, I think that's also played into here. And I think you have great momentum and you've done a lot of great things for the town. And we also don't want to forget that we have how many employees on SAP, like it's not a small number. So we do owe it to those employees to make sure that we're giving them the time and that you're being able to represent them as best possible. So I completely agree that if there are issues, that we sit down and we work to resolve them. And, I think to have you in once a year where you represent so many employees, I think is challenging in itself. And so maybe we try to have you come in on a more routine basis to update us on what's going on. Thank you.
I'm going to go in my order. Mr. Shea?
Thanks. Agree with everything that's been said so far. We'll just note that as one of several people that did serve on the committee to form the current town administrator bylaw language, and there were excellent people that were involved in that, had a say in that. I don't think there was ever an intention, that I'll speak only for myself, but I would hope it's an agreed upon sentiment that there was never ever an intent to create conflict between the two. And if anything, there was an effort on that group's part to make sure that there weren't conflicts. That being said, there were two documents written at two different times. There may be those. And I would encourage a conversation, to clarify any discrepancies, but certainly if it goes beyond that, then that conversation ought to happen as well.
All right, thanks, Brian. And Mr. Stivers.
Thank you. Again, I think this is an important issue. And as some of you know, I've been actually attending the Personnel Board meetings for at least the last 6 or 7 years pretty regularly. So I've observed a lot of the interactions that have gone on. And it seems to me that while there is clearly some overlap between the SAP and the town administrator bylaw, I don't think that's the root of the issue here. Almost regardless of what they say, I think it's within our abilities collectively to agree on what the right relationship is, who does what, et cetera, et cetera. And if it turns out to be different from what the bylaws say, we can always go back and work to change the bylaws. But I think the focus is to find a structure that works and has the groups working effectively together. And I think, again, I'm always reminded that having good people who are well motivated, appropriately compensated, and effective in their jobs is the key to the success of the entire organization here. And if this is getting in the way of that in any way, I think that's an issue that we need to deal with. So I support Ms. Rosenblum's suggestion of finding a way to engage in that conversation. I don't think you can do it in too large a group. So having a small group take that on and work through the structure issues and say who does what, and make sure that there's a structure that everybody understands that makes sense and everybody's doing things within that appropriately is a useful first step. And I'm confident that with reasonable people trying to accomplish a common objective, we can make great progress with that. So I'd support that direction. Thanks.
Okay, I think that's it for us on this issue. Unless there's some new ground, I think we're done with this issue.
I'd
Yes?
just like to address a couple of questions that came up, Marty, and one thing that I wanted to add that is on our agenda that ties in with this.
Okay.
Thanks everybody for their comments. To Ms. Malinowski's comment. Ms. Malinowski, there are 60 plus SAP employees. That was a question. And one of the things I would suggest as a starting point, this has been a pet project of mine. I think it's going on 2 years, is an org chart. It's in your packet. We don't have a town org chart. The Personnel Board would like us to have an org chart. It would clarify a lot of things. It became a priority of ours 2 years ago. I'm told we don't have one. Mr. Purple said it was not a priority. So I drafted one, my board approved it, and I turned it over to Mr. Purple. It's in your packet. I think this would go a long way for a number of reasons. Again, it's late. I don't think I have to explain to anybody here the benefit of an org chart. It's page 26 in the packet. So at our meeting in December of 2018, Selectwoman Bonnie Faniff said she thought it was a great idea and tasked Mr. Purple with bringing this to completion. It still needs to be reviewed and adopted by the Board of Selectmen, corrected if you find it's almost 2 years old now. Obviously, for any professional who deals with an org chart, you know, they're usually more layered than this, but I think a one-page visual on who reports to who the independent boards are, who aren't. There's a lot of confusion in the SAP world because many of the SAP employees are in departments that report to the Board of Selectmen, but some are not. We have independent boards with SAP employees, and that would be Planning Board, Board of Health, and Library. So sometimes when we're talking about who does what, it'd be real helpful to have an org chart. I cannot understand why we can't make this happen. I've already taken a big first step and it's in the packet. So maybe that could be the first topic of conversation when we sit down. You know where to find me. The last thing that we had on the agenda was the merit program. This was something I wanted to round out, Mr. Healy, if I may, because it's been on the agenda before and something that predecessor Board of Selectmen and other members of the board have said is important to them. And it's just not going to happen this time. I can explain why, or we can let it go to our next meeting. I sense it may be the will of the boards that we meet again in the not too distant future. The hour is late. I can save the merit program discussion for a future meeting if you like.
How long?
It's you know, and it may bleed into some of the other issues with why things don't happen and when they don't happen. So maybe
right.
the second meeting.
I think maybe for another day.
Yeah, I think part of the dialogue with the town administrator would be a good place to start with that.
Yeah, and again, and Brian, I'm when I was talking about, and I do, any statute I didn't write, I don't like these days. So that being said, there is, and again, reasonable people and unreasonable people can differ. I think there's some tension between those two, the bylaws, but that's but we can figure that out and address that. And I took a look at the org chart. And there's some tension there, at least in my view. But that's why you do a draft and then talk about it. But let's
absolutely.
Okay, so let's leave it at that. We covered the topics that we identified in the agenda, and maybe for our board, I don't want to lard things on for October 27th, but maybe on November 4th doesn't look like it's going to be awful right now, although that can change obviously, but maybe a discussion item that touches upon a couple of these areas that we've talked about tonight. All right. Nobody's saying no, nobody's saying yes. So
November 4th could be risky. There could be massive depression on November 4th.
There's going to be something on November 4th.
Marty,
Well,
if I may.
I think it will get fixing up these statutes and making the personnel business work better will give us all a goal to work toward, to get our minds off of whatever's bothering us on November 4th.
There you go. I'm sorry, Lisa.
No, just to clarify, Marty. So I personally would hope there'd be some type of conversation between now and November 4th. To me, it's 2 weeks away and we're talking about lack of communication. So I would hope that there could be some form of conversation that takes place between, whether it's Betsy as chair of personnel and Mr. Purple, and even if a member of the board sits in, I really hesitate. I don't know how the board feels. I hesitate to put this off based on the frustration that we've heard tonight. At least some form of conversation, not resolve anything, but put some things on the table and start a process to move forward.
Yeah,
That's just my suggestion.
That's a good idea, I think.
This is one of those where you've got a line of people and it looks like everybody else took a step backwards. And I'm happy to be the Board of Selectmen participant in that process. I'll bail at a later date, but for now, I'm happy to try to fill in between now and November 4th and at least get some sort of conversation going.
Great, thank you. And thank you to Personnel Board for coming.
And on behalf of the board, on behalf of my board, thanks for listening. I know you all have a lot on your plates, but honestly, we have no agenda other than to fulfill our mission under the SAP and to make everything work better for everybody. And I think we can do that. I'll be sitting by the phone waiting for your phone call.
And finally, I will say, Dorianne, that I found that artwork behind you very distracting. I don't know quite what to make of it, but.
Betsy, do you need to adjourn your meeting?
Sure. Thank you, Ms. Braccio. My board, are you good to adjourn? I can't see them. I don't know if they're still there. Anybody from personnel have anything else they want to say?
They're shaking their heads no.
All right, thank you very much. Therefore, the meeting is the Personnel Board virtual meeting, the part of the meeting that is the Personnel Board, is adjourned at 21:12. Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right. Good night.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. What did I do with my agenda?
Halfway through now.
No. Oh, next up, Chair's report. I do have my notes on that. Actually, I'm not going to steal your thunder, Brian, just to mention that maybe I'll loop back to it, that there's an update on Deerfoot that's coming. Halloween, it's not a specific agenda item. We've alluded to this in previous discussions, and members of the board can correct me if I'm wrong, but the position of the Board of Selectmen is that we hope everyone has as happy and healthy a Halloween as they feel comfortable having. And that we've linked on our town website to the guidance by the state. It's pretty comprehensive. I think it makes an awful lot of sense. It builds on guidance that we've gotten in all areas of our life for the last 7 months or so. My personal view is I think it's important that, again, if people feel comfortable, I'm not sure if there's a bigger holiday for kids than Halloween. And, you know, grasping for normalcy during this, extraordinary doesn't begin to describe it, situation that we found ourselves in the last 7 months. Halloween for kids is about as normal as you can possibly get. So I encourage families, again, if you feel comfortable, and take a good look at the state guidance, to have a happy and healthy Halloween. And hopefully it'll be a nice night, and kids in costumes can be walking around neighborhoods. I always enjoy it. And that for folks who are not going to be out in costumes, but for waiting for the costume me's, that they think carefully about how they're going to engage those who are out on Halloween in as safe and healthy a way as possible. I think there's a way to do it. Again, I think the state guidance is very helpful, comprehensive, and is a good outline for how to have a happy and healthy Halloween. I'll interrupt, and if anyone else has anything to weigh in that area before I go on to a couple of other things that I've got in my report.
Not just kids. I'm going to miss the pumpkin walk.
Yeah, no, there are some parts of our normalcy that we're not going to be able to get, which is why I think it's as important to grab as much as we can. Okay. And I hope the weather's nice. I had sent about a little over a month ago a letter to the ADA committee, to the ADA chair, Mr. Sines, about some of the issues that have been raised with the public safety complex. And I just got it back today. I'll send it out to everyone. It's a response to 3 particular questions that I posed about whether or not they thought it was required under the ADA, whether or not they thought it was a good idea, whether or not they had addressed it as a committee, and he responded to it. So maybe put it on as an agenda item down the line for us to talk about and decide what, if anything, we should or need to do going forward, given the information we got from them. Karen Galligan, DPW, brought up an issue with me. Chief Achilles had sent out a communication about in the course of the fire department's duties, they were up on Overlook and encountered some trees that he thought were threatening from a public safety perspective. Ms. Galligan touched base with me and advised me that all of the trees that are potentially could potentially damage some power lines and some cable lines and the like up in that area are all on private property. And so she just let me know, and so I can let you know that she is going to interact with the landowners of that private property and hopefully come to some sort of accommodation with them to address what might be what at least the fire chief has addressed as a safety issue. Flowing then directly into more tree stuff. I saw a little bit of the personnel board meeting and they were talking trees. And there was reference to a policy that I guess I'm just wondering from a planning perspective, if and when Mr. Stiver is putting you on the spot here, we might get a draft of an updated draft of a policy that we might consider, because there seems to be a great deal of uncertainty floating on around about exactly what to do with trees.
Be happy to give a brief update. We had another discussion with our tree discussion group, and I think we're very close to resolution of an approach that actually works for the planning board and works for the DPW. There's one issue that remains open that I think we as a board have an opportunity to set some guidance around, and that is when the joint or combined hearings are required between the planning board and the DPW tree warden. And the DPW has a view that those joint hearings are not required in a number of cases. And the planning board believes that it makes sense to have those hearings as joint hearings. And we've not been able to actually reach agreement on that. And what I'd be looking for is guidance from this group to say, we, obviously DPW works for us. And so we have the opportunity to say, here's what we believe ought to happen with that particular issue. If we can get that one done, I think then the rest of it falls into place. I am happy to report that there were tree hearings last week for, I think there were like 20 or 19 trees on non-scenic roads and for 10 trees on scenic roads. Most of them were obviously dead, and there was very little controversy. I was actually impressed with the care and diligence that DPW, tree warden, and the consulting arborist took, and we wound up approving removal of most of those trees. Some of them will be pruned to save the trees. And again, I think that's working at the operational level pretty well, but there's a hearing issue that we need to resolve. So I would hope that we can get that on our agenda soon. I think that's a fairly brief conversation. If we can fix that one, and the rest of it, I think, falls into place.
The only thing I'll say is I want to see the paper. I think I've made it clear that I don't like things that bylaws and the like that I didn't write. So
well, be happy to have you write this one.
No, I don't think I'm going to do that. Okay, that is it for that is my report. Ms. Braccio.
Sorry, I am good. Thank you.
Ms. Malinowski.
So I have 2 points. I did have some preliminary conversations with both chiefs about regional dispatch, and Chief Paulus did do some legwork in talking to some towns who have done it and who are still doing it. And so I wanted to bring it back to this board to decide kind of what next steps would be if Chief Paul suggested a subcommittee to look at some of the data and figure out, really you have to find the right partner to do this. So does it make sense to go the subcommittee route, or do you want me to kind of continue to go down the path with the chiefs and then bring something back to this board? I didn't know how you wanted to proceed.
I'm not sure if I'm ready to decide tonight.
Okay.
Is there some data in writing? Is there something to look at?
No, I don't have data yet. I didn't
Okay.
want to pursue that if it wasn't the will of this board for me to go ahead and get the data. If you want me to do that for the next step, that I can do that and then bring it back and then we can decide what we want to do.
I think that makes the most sense.
Okay.
I'm interested in that. Yeah, I'd like to see that.
So why don't I go ahead and do that?
Okay.
And then the second update that I wanted to give is actually related to the schools and the communication that's going out for COVID. They are doing a good job of notifying the schools impacted as it comes up. And I know a lot of you don't have children in the school system. So I just wanted you to make you aware that those emails are going out. And if you wanted to be included, I'm sure we could ask Mr. Purple to include us on those communications.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. It's just going out to parents and
yeah.
Do you get all of those, Mark?
I do get, usually excuse me, usually I get them probably an hour before they go out to the public or to the school community. So I can absolutely forward those to the board for informational.
Yeah, I'm not looking to weigh in and tell the schools what they should or shouldn't be doing. God knows. But yeah, really.
Trouble.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I just think it'd be helpful and might help inform maybe some stuff we're thinking about doing at a town level. So, okay, great.
Okay, thank you.
Brian.
Thanks, Marty. Two things. First, big thank you to the community for their support this past weekend with at the golf tournament and support for ALS 1. In total, with contributions made at the clubhouse plus other contributions that were made online, it was close to $4,500 that was raised. Last year, over that same weekend, about $2,500 was raised, so a significant more amount of money was raised. Certainly, we've had a lot more action at the golf course, a lot more players this year compared to last year. We certainly had much better weekend weather over the full weekend this year compared to last as well. And it's a very pleased with the results, particularly as well in this challenging year where people may not be in a position to donate as much as they could in a normal year. So thanks to the community. Hope we can keep that going as we move forward to remember two great citizens from our town. And the other update I wanted to offer was we did receive the report from PAR Engineering on Deerfoot Road. And my main takeaway from the report that they had prepared was that due to improper grading of pavement at the south end of Deerfoot Road, and it's improper because it's trench patches. It's a trench patch over where the water main was done. It's trench patch over where other construction associated with the new homes was done. That is resulting in water that is actually bypassing two of the structures that are at the south end of the road. And that water is flowing north to the catch basin near house number 122. I think I'd mentioned at the meeting last time around that PAR was going to be working with Karen on a grading plan. They again noted in that report that a grading plan with pavement graded properly at the southerly end will divert water from the south end of the road into the infrastructure that is at the south end of the road, which will mean that less water will flow towards the catch basin at number 122. I think this is a consistent finding with what Karen has been telling us. And I think that the best course of action, Karen has a window of opportunity with the paving company. She's been delayed for a while from that company. Paving season is coming to an end. I think the proper course of action is to move forward with paving. Really, the bottom line, the report did not recommend that additional structures be put in place. So I think to handle the town infrastructure portion of that roadway and solve the town infrastructure portion of the drainage issues, I think we need to move forward with the final course of paving, graded properly to divert water where it's supposed to go, and move on from there.
And Mr. Stivers, before I go to you, just to follow up, Brian had sent me a copy of that report. It then went out to everyone on the board. I agree with everything he said. I followed up. I had a conversation with Ms. Galligan, and she does have what she thinks is a very narrow window because of because it's New England and we're heading into winter. And I mean, this is a DPW decision, and we layered on that decision by getting an additional report. This is an area in their expertise. I told her I didn't think it was something that required a vote by our board. But that, consistent with what Mr. Shea said, I told her that I agreed with her assessment and would advise the board that the plan is to go forward with paving before the weather hits, probably sometime this week.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
Brian, you're obviously the engineer here. Is it reasonable to assume that it sounds like the grading process is very sensitive in terms of making sure it's done correctly? When you're laying asphalt like that, can you actually do a reasonably precise job of measuring and adjusting the grading as that process occurs? I mean, those machines are big, and I watch them plop down asphalt in large quantities. Is that something that you could be out there with your laser level or something and make sure you're doing it at the right level all the way along the road? You're muted, Brian.
Yeah, sorry, I hit the wrong button. I can assure you that I will not be out there with my laser level doing that work. But there are those that specialize in that work, and that can be done. And I think having the plan in place that PAR is preparing will go a long way to give direction to the paving company, just to give them the information on, how thick the material needs to be here compared to here. And, they know where the structures are. It's very easy to set up a level, get a surveying rod and, confirm the elevations of those structures and make sure that the pavement is placed so it's higher around them, so it drains towards those structures.
Okay, good. Just as long as that works, 98% of the time when folks who know what they're doing do it, that sounds like that's the right path here. So good, thank you.
Yeah, Ms. Malinowski.
Thanks, Brian, for the update. So obviously there were a lot of residents that were concerned about what the next steps were and how issues were going to be resolved. Are we communicating with the residents to let them know what the next steps are?
You know what? I got the sense from Karen that was in the offing, but I can follow up and make sure that there is communication. It's a pretty small neighborhood that folks are advised, and it is. There may be, I suspect, still some disagreement about whether or not this is the right course. But again, we've got a Department of Public Works. We did a study. Everything that we've looked at from our side of the aisle indicates that this is the way to go, and I'm supportive of that route.
So Marty, if I may just add one thing to that.
Yep.
I know the residents had hired an engineer to look at the drainage issues associated with that development. And a number of the recommendations dealt with drainage issues that were on the private properties that are really outside of our control. That engineer's report concluded with a recommendation that an engineering study be done on the main roadway itself. Well, we've moved forward with implementing that study with what the town has worked out with PAR. So we've followed through on that. One of the things that Karen was going to do was actually reach out to that other engineer, because in his report, it looks like one of his recommended solutions is a drain structure on a private property connecting to a pipe in the roadway. That he was looking at the original system in the roadway, not the newly laid out system. So his catch basin would actually tie into a pipe that no longer flows. So she was going to reach out to him just to confirm that he fully understood the infrastructure system that is in place within the roadway itself. I'm not 100% sure he was aware of modifications that had been made. So again, I think as Marty had said, there may still be disagreement, but you know, I think the town has done its due diligence and followed through on its commitment to look at the situation, to look at what we can do to improve, you know, the roadway itself. And certainly the PAR report also notes a lot less sedimentation than what had occurred previously as well. And the developer has followed through to establish growth of lawns and other areas to help control the sedimentation problem. Hopefully we can get the final top course placed properly. Let's control that water. And you know, I certainly understand the frustration from that group as well. They've been living in a construction zone for quite a time. So I'm sure that's a contributing part of this. And hopefully this is a step forward to help improve the overall situation.
Great, thanks again, Brian. And Lisa, I'm just going to add one more thing. And Brian mentioning the golf tournament, and that is having to do with the Schifrins. And that is, you might remember that in August we put off a ceremony for the Schifrin field to be named. And the idea was perhaps it could be done in November to tie into the 1-year anniversary of Brian Schifrin's passing. For a variety of reasons, and Lisa has been in touch with Mrs. Schifrin about this. There is general agreement that maybe the ideal time would have been in November, but the best time is going to be in the spring. And so the target date now is sometime in the spring, hopefully tied into the beginning of the Little League and the girls softball season. So it's not going to happen in November. So anything else on that, Lisa? No. And again, thanks.
You covered it perfectly.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And Lisa's been coordinating all the communication for us on that end. So thanks for that. I think that's it for reports. Mr. Purple.
Wait a minute.
Oh, what?
I have a couple of things. May I?
Your questions don't count as your report? All right, go ahead, Sam.
Have I been on the clock? How much time do I have? A couple of quick things, a few quick things here. One, following your comment, Marty, about the ADA questions, I attended the ADA committee meeting yesterday morning, and they expressed some frustration about the assessment of town facilities that's in the works here. And so I'm hoping that is moving along, and we'll keep that one moving, just to comment. Marty passed along to me an inquiry from Jason Malinowski about our issue on our goals list about firefighting water for Pine Hill Road. And he's been talking with Chief Achilles about how the fire department is talking about dealing with that. And for example, they're looking at the possibility of additional pumper trucks to add water capacity for fires on Pine Hill. And I gave him a brief update on my conversations about the possibility of hooking into MWRA water on Pine Hill. And I did follow up with Karen Galligan, who seems to think that there is at least technically a possibility of doing that. She's going to do a little more informal investigation on that. And so we will try to figure out if that's a possibility, which could be an interesting option to buying additional pumper trucks. So again, as part of the MWRA advisory board role I have, MWRA has been fairly supportive of towns tying into the water system in various ways. And they've got loans, no interest, low interest loans to build water infrastructure. So again, it's something that seems to me worth looking at, and I will continue to follow up on that and figure out if there's something there. Also following our conversation with John Butler on the transfer station and his suggestion that we consider licensing of trash haulers, I attended the Board of Health meeting last week or so and raised that issue with them as a very informal, sort of informational kind of thing. They were not aware of John's presentation, which I'd forwarded to them. And they're interested in the possibility of doing that, with the caveat that they're very busy now, clearly, and that they have very limited administrative resource. But it seems to me that there is a possibility of getting something done there if we can figure out a way to support them administratively and figure out what's required from a vote standpoint. Do we have to simply vote to accept certain state statutes relative to that licensing process, or can the Board of Health do that? Which would be a question, I would assume, for town council. So I think that we have an opportunity to do something there if this board wants to keep that one moving. But I think the ball is in our court at this point to work with the Board of Health to figure out what needs to happen and see if they are supportive of that. So opportunity there, but I think again, it's up to us. Quick follow-up on the golf course is, folks know I've been following that. The year-to-date revenues are up almost 70% over prior years. So great news, generating money actually to either to put back into the golf course. Rounds are up, and we're going to hit the greatest number of rounds there, it looks like, at least in recorded history from what I've seen here. So very exciting, and turned out to be, again, a real asset for the town. So I think that's very good news. That's it for me.
All right, Mr. Purple.
Excuse me. I'm
Oops.
sorry, Marty,
Sorry, Liz.
just a process question for you. So under the consent agenda, the contract for the downtown initiative for Judy Barrett, I was going to give a brief update of how the contract came about. Would you prefer I did it under members report, or hold the item and do it under the consent?
You know, Julie Connolly and
She's here as well.
yeah, I would do it under the consent and hold it.
Okay.
I'm guessing they may want to weigh in or have something to say. So why don't we do it that way? Okay.
I just wanted to check. Thank you.
Yep. All right. The third time, Mr. Purple.
Are we sure? Is everybody all set? Okay. I was going to be very brief, but actually it just sounds like I'm responding to Sam. So I apologize. I'm not slighting anybody else. It's just Sam gave me a lot of lead-ins.
I'll compare notes with you before the next meeting then.
Yeah, let's see. So I think with the golf course, you know, the one thing, and Sam is absolutely right. It's been, you know, since, you know, it's probably been at least a decade since they've seen, you know, these numbers in terms of rounds and everything. And that it's been the one silver lining, I think, in this pandemic, is that golf is one of the things that was able to open up, you know, quicker than anything else. And I think that, you know, since people may be working remotely and everything in that, a 9-hole course, it's great to go out and, you know, and do a round in a couple of hours. It's not an 18-hole course where it's, you know, maybe 5-6 hours. So we are seeing some benefit. I'm hoping, you know, that those rounds and everything, you know, will continue, but post-COVID, you know, we're going to have to find out what the real numbers look at. But for right now, you know, we'll take it. With regards to MWRA, all I will say is they'll always sell you water. You know, they're always happy to help move you forward in that, so they can, you know, they can sell you water. But, you know, if there's a way to do something in that, and for, you know, given that, you know, the influence of your position on the board, Sam, hey, you know, let's see if we could take advantage. I do think that there is, you know, and I think Mr. Malinowski could speak to, there's quite a lot on deck for capital committee already. And at some point we've got to figure out what our capacity is to be able to address, you know, some of those things. And the third thing, which is what you started with regards to the ADA self-evaluation transition plan, we did file the submission with CMRPC for the grant through the Mass Office of Disability. If you recall, you know, we did have $40,000 budgeted by town meeting to get this done. So CMRPC has put in for us, and I believe 4 or 5 other communities for MOD grants for self-evaluating transition plans. We may not all get funded. However, I've already told CMRPC that we do have funding available. You know, if we don't get a grant, they're still doing the work. You know, we're still going to use the consultants that they have on board, and they've realized that and they've agreed to that. And I think that we budgeted 40,000. The work they've evaluated for the grant process is about 41, but they said if we don't get the grant, we'll make some adjustments. We'll come in, you know, where we need to be with our budget to get that done. So the process right now, it looks like grant awards will be announced in December. Work has to be completed by June. So it's a pretty quick process. You know, I appreciate, you know, the work that Vanessa did with CMRPC, and John Parent and Tim Davis did a lot of work on pulling together some of the data and everything that we needed to. So I appreciate their efforts, and hopefully it turns into a grant award.
Good, thanks. Should tell them that we just cut our funding to $20,000, so they have to come in at that if they do it outside the grant.
Yeah, well, you know, and it was interesting because CMRPC has applied for these MOD grants in the past, and you know, we had a conversation, and they said last year, say we had 6 communities we applied for, we only got 3 funded. And so I said, well, look, we'll apply for the grant. We'll say we'll match $10,000, which will make us a more, you know, attractive grant recipient. You know, look, if they're willing to give us 30, I think that's great. But either way, we're getting the project done between now and June, and, you know, through CMRPC, which again, saves us a lot of trouble with the bidding, and everything else. And I think we're really going to get a good, you know, good contractor to work with.
Good, thank you.
All right, moving to consent agenda. Is there a motion?
Can we hold F, please?
C,
Bless you.
please. C.
I have a question about B.
I was going to hold A. Sorry.
Is there anything that got through? I'm trying to remember now.
D and E, right?
Yeah, E.
E.
Do it.
All right. All right.
I think E got through too, didn't it?
D and E, I thought.
D and E.
D and E, okay.
All right, I move to approve the entire consent agenda, except for most of the consent agenda. Move to approve items D and E on the consent agenda.
There is no consent.
Second.
Discussion, no. Ms. Braccio?
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski?
Aye.
Mr. Shea?
Aye.
Mr. Stivers?
Aye.
And Mr. Healy, aye. All right. A, who held A?
I held A.
Okay.
One slight change to the minutes under members' reports. On page 6 of the minutes, members' reports, 3rd paragraph, it says, Mr. Shea stated there has not been a report from PAR Engineering as of yet. He said he and Ms. Galligan visited the locations during multiple rain events. It was actually the engineers from PAR that visited the location during multiple rain events. So that's the only change that I would request.
While we're on A, I have one small one. In the EDC part, Judy Barrett's name is misspelled as Judi instead of Y. While we're changing.
Okay, with those edits / revisions, I will move to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Second.
Discussion, no. Ms. Braccio?
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski?
Aye.
Mr. Shea?
Aye.
Mr. Stivers?
Aye.
And Mr. Healy is aye. So that's approved unanimously. B, who held B?
I held B. Just had a question about the annual town meeting date. That happens to be Passover and Palm Sunday weekend there. Did we talk about doing it March 20th instead of the 27th?
We did not, Sam. I thought that avoided the holidays when I took a look at it.
It avoids Easter, which is the following weekend. But, you know, again, I don't have strong feelings about it, but I know some people might be.
So
raise the question.
So if it's the Saturday of
The 20th,
Palm Sunday weekend, I personally don't see that that's a conflict.
not a conflict for me particularly, but I've heard people
So-
express concern about that in the past.
Well, I think it might be certainly if it spills over into Sunday, if for some reason it might, but
Yeah.
there's no,
No,
I
we
think
wouldn't
have
we
the
would have a meeting
flexibility
on
to
Sunday.
move it.
Yeah, it'd go for Saturday to Monday, I guess, under the bylaw. But
And
Yeah.
Saturday's
Anyway.
Passover.
yeah, I don't have strong feelings about it, but we've talked about this kind of thing in the past. So
Does the bylaw mention something about flexibility with respect to holidays?
it says any Saturday in April or March,
March.
before the end of March. So you could do it any Saturday in March, but doesn't specifically mention, holidays, religious, secular, etc. I don't think. Not a big deal, but just didn't know if Mark, you'd had conversations with people about that.
I thought we had taken a look. I really thought that avoided the holidays the best. I mean, from the finance team's point of view, selfishly, we'd like to be it as late in March as possible.
Right, understand.
Because you get earlier and, you're having to approve a budget, at the end of January, beginning of February, if we're going to, because I do agree that if you get the first couple of Saturdays in March, you probably get away from some of that, from some of the
Right.
conflicts, with the holidays, but it really doesn't play well with, with the process.
Okay. Yeah, the only other choice for me would be the 20th.
Yeah.
But again, I don't feel strongly about it. Just wanted to raise the issue.
Does it have to be done tonight, Mark?
Well, I think we've got to set it at some point. It doesn't have to be done tonight. And I know that I've had conversations with Mr. Shea, who kind of feels that setting a date in March is a little bit of a fool's errand, and we're going to probably end up getting pushed to, to May, something like this. So.
Mr. Shea will just note that he fully acknowledges that the bylaws require the town meeting be set in March. So
Yes, that was
so we have to do that, and I would fully expect that we'll be in the same position that we were in this past spring.
So it may be moot.
So Mark, let's do this. Let's put it on. We're back here. We've got a meeting with the Capitol people on the 27th. Let's just make sure that again, my preference would be not to set it on Passover. I just think that,
I agree.
If it's avoidable, then it's avoidable. So let's make sure what I don't know if that weekend is in fact Passover, but let's make sure. And if it is, we'll kick it up to the 20th.
Okay.
All right. So we'll put it on for the 27th. Since consent agendas go so quickly with us, we know we can zip right through it.
No consent to anything.
All right. Who held C?
I did.
Okay.
So I had a question on the April 9th of 2018
Me
executive
too.
session. So is there a reason why we have to approve these if they're already posted on the website?
The short answer would be no, but I don't have it in our records that we have voted to release them.
So you did. They were January 2nd, I believe, of 2019. And then they were posted on January 3rd of 2019.
They were voted to be approved or voted to be released?
I have to pull up the minutes. Hold on.
If they're on the town website, I would assume they were released.
I would assume so too, but we didn't have a record of it being released. That's why they were on here.
Yeah, I didn't see those in the list that you sent around, so I was confused why they were included, I guess.
So I'm pretty sure they were included in the list that was sent around, but.
Well, what is, I guess what is, if we can't have absolute confirmation now, if they've already been approved and released and we release them tonight, then it's a nullity. It's already been done. So what's the downside to approving them tonight?
I think, well, I just wanted to make sure I understood executive minute approval. And obviously this has been a hot topic to make sure we're tracking executive minutes, what's redacted, what's been released. So I have concerns about what we're actually tracking, and are we really monitoring this on a regular basis?
So two different questions.
As part of, so it looks like you approved executive session minutes on January 2nd, but I don't see that date. But they were posted the next day. So I can't tell where you would have approved these minutes.
Yeah, I can't answer the question if I can't see what you're looking at, Chelsea. So
I'm just looking at the town website at the minutes.
Yeah, I apologize. So like I said, but I did not have these down as being released.
Okay, well, they are. They're on the town website.
So it doesn't hurt to,
Well, let me clarify. I don't have it down as the board voting to release them.
so it doesn't hurt to vote to release them tonight then.
I don't see that there's a downside to it, as Marty said, but.
Right,
Okay.
but then
I
let's,
think what my point is then, if that's the case, is can we have somebody who hasn't been involved in this process go back through and reevaluate the spreadsheet that we're now tracking to make sure that we have everything lined up so we know what hasn't been released yet?
Sure.
yeah, that's a fair point. Two different things. Let's make sure that yeah, because if if there's a mistake on something that maybe there's not a vote to release yet, then let's make sure that there's not another issue. So let's just, yeah, dot our I's and cross our T's.
Okay.
Okay. But otherwise, I will move to approve consent agenda item C.
Second.
Discussion, no. Ms. Braccio.
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski.
Aye.
Mr. Shea.
Aye.
Mr. Stivers.
Aye.
Mr. Healy is aye. And we already did D&E, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
So,
we're
Mr.
on to,
I'm sorry, before you go on to F, is there somebody from the board who hadn't been involved in this that wants to take a look through this? Through the, in terms of the minutes? I'm fine with letting someone else take a look at this.
I'm happy to do it. That's
Okay.
fine. That's fine.
all right. Actually, we're not going on to other matters. We're going on to Ms. Braccio's item.
Yes.
All right. And thanks to Ms. Reynolds, Ms. Connolly, and is that it? And Ms. Munsif for hanging in. But
right.
it's all yours, Lisa.
All right, so my hold was for two different reasons. One is, and I'll get to it as I go through the update, is we need to adjust the amount that's currently on here from the 7,100. As we went back, and actually a member of the board had reached out to me and said the numbers on the contract don't tie out. If you do the $175 an hour for $5,000, it comes out to 28.57 hours. So Ms. Reynolds had sent an email tonight that showed it was supposed to be 28.5 hours. So the original contract was for $5,000. And what we did is we just adjusted the contract that was in place for Judy. So if we adjust the 5,000 back to hold on one second. Where did I put it? Hold on one second. Sorry. Here it is. If we adjust it to $4,987.50, which would have been the original contract for 28.5 hours. And what we did is in discussions with Judy, we increased that by 12 hours, which was $2,100. So the actual amount that should be on here for the fee for service is $7,087.50. And now I'll tell you how we got to that point. So at the EDC meeting on Friday, it was agreed on a path forward being not utilizing the overlay and having Judy do some redistricting. And based on feedback that was received, EDC's point person, Julie Conley, and I had a conversation with Judy Barrett on Friday. We talked about the best path forward and what the cost would be to actually do the zoning rewrite that planning board had suggested in doing a I can't think of the word I'm looking for, sorry. in changing the bylaw and creating a sub bylaw. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here. Here it is here, sorry. In doing a subsection of the bylaw. So planning board had suggested that we take the downtown business village district and break it into two separate districts, one encompassing Fayetteville and Corderville, and one being town center district, which is what we are trying to do for downtown. So based on the suggestions and the conversations we had, we went to Judy Barrett and we asked what would be involved in doing that. She said she could, on top of the design standards, she could actually create the bylaw. It would entail 8 additional hours because she had already started the work on it. Once the contract is updated, she would have the deliverable ready on that for a first draft on Wednesday, tomorrow, by the end of the day. So we had agreed to the 8 hours. We thought it was reasonable to be able to move forward with that. And again, Julie and I were both involved in that conversation. We also built in an additional 4 hours. With the bylaw is also going to be a comment matrix. And the comment matrix will go to planning board, EDC, and any other shareholder that would like to comment on it. Also included in the 8 hours is Judy taking all of the comments that come back and updating the bylaw. But we had figured there's the potential, based on the number of comments, to be able to want to have at least one more joint meeting with planning board so we can all be on the same page with changes. So we built in an additional 4 hours. Just in case. So that's where the $2,100 additional dollars had came from. So we would expect the draft, but she needs to have an executed contract to move forward. So it made sense where Judy is under the direction of point person Julie Conley from EDC and myself, that the quickest way to get this done and start moving forward on the timeline and trying to meet it was to have the Board of Selectmen update the contract. And Julie, if you'd like to bring her in, she might add something to the conversations that we had with Judy Barrett. So Vanessa, if we could bring, or Katie, if we could bring Julie in.
So the 2,100, Lisa, is 12 hours at 175 an hour?
Correct,
Okay.
Correct, yes. So in time, trying to get to the original 5,000, that's where the difference was. It didn't tie out, even though the original contract before this one had said it would be billed at the rate of $175, but not to exceed 5,000. The numbers didn't jive. You couldn't get an actual number in, and clarification was provided in an email today that was supposed to be 28.5 hours.
Okay.
So that's the difference on that. So what I'm asking is to adjust the contract to $7,087.50, which is the original 28.5 hours and the additional 12 hours.
Okay.
Okay,
And we
Ju-
have Ms. Connolly, if she has
Yes.
anything to add in this area before, seems a pretty reasonable vote.
Sure,
Julie?
I don't have much to add. Lisa gave a great summary. Thank you. We've had a few really good conversations. We had a great discussion at our meeting last week. We had a great discussion with Claire, who's the administrator of the grant that all this funding falls under. And we had a great conversation with Judy. I think she's prepared now. We've given her a lot of information and we're hopeful that we'll have a good product coming soon. We have a EDC meeting scheduled for Friday to go over the comments and obviously share with the other boards and committees, and then come back and, knock on wood. I'm trying not to get too excited, but after working on this for the years that we have, I'm cautiously optimistic that maybe we have a path forward to getting this done. So thank you all for your support in that.
Yeah, and I'll also add, Marty, that on planning board meeting last night, I gave them kind of the same update that I just gave you, that Judy is drafting the zoning change. I had requested from them that they put it on their 11/2 agenda for comments and review, so we can try to stay as close to the timeline that's been put in place, whether or not town meeting happens in the spring. I mean, ultimately, I think all of us want the best bylaw that's going to pass town meeting with support from everybody. So in trying to be respectful of the timeline that's there, planning board has put it on their 11/2 agenda. I know, Marty, you're putting it on an agenda. So we should be able to get comments back to Judy after the planning board meeting. If EDC's meeting this Friday and we're meeting on the 27th, I believe it's on the agenda, and planning board's meeting on 11/2. So we'll get the comments back to Judy from the comment matrix she's sending, and, you know, we can start moving forward with a collaborative effort to, you know, to bring this to town meeting, which has been the goal, you know, I think of everybody for a long time. So.
Great, good stuff. All right, and we will, I think, assuming it comes in on Wednesday, then we can even have it on as, I think we're gonna have a long meeting with Capital on the 27th, but I think this is important enough to get going as quickly as possible. This can be, again, I'm trying to be as narrow as possible on the 27th for the agenda, but this is one that we might add on.
And I think it's great. We're going to have it tomorrow afternoon, that if it can, you know, we'll, as soon as we get it, it'll be forwarded to Mr. Purple to forward out to the board, so everybody can start looking over it and getting their comments together, and, you know, it might streamline the process a little bit as well, Marty.
All right, so I'm going to move to approve the revised contract from Ms. Barrett as described by Ms. Braccio. I'm not going over those numbers again.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Stivers. Any discussion? All right, Ms. Braccio.
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski.
Aye.
Mr. Shea.
Aye.
Mr. Stivers.
Aye.
And I am aye. It's unanimous.
Thank
Great.
you, Julie.
Thank you, Julie and Claire, and for
everybody.
hanging in.
Does that mean that Judy has to work 28 hours between now and tomorrow night?
No. Well, the performance standards, I don't know if I said this, the performance standards are actually included in the $7,000 price, because you can't get the bylaw without the standards, obviously. So,
Okay.
thank you.
Whatever she needs to do.
All right, we are done with the consent agenda. Other matters. 7A, Lisa, this is you again, the cemetery policies and procedures.
This
Is
one's
this
going
just
to be
a quick
quick.
update, or
This is going to be quick.
Okay.
So, as some of you know, there was a concern with some of the headstones, older headstones in the cemetery have fallen and broken, and, you know, they're just kind of laying on the ground. So we've been talking with Mark and Karen Galligan well over a year on this discussion. We've come up with some different plans. We met again the other day, and I think we've come up with a plan that works. I just wanted to share it with the board and see if the board is agreeable to this path, that it would be, Eagle Scouts are always looking for a great project, and this would be a great one, to be able to have an Eagle Scout catalog that go through and catalog the headstones in the cemetery. They could catalog whether some are broken, some are cracked, some are tilting or tipping. And some of the older headstones where there may or may not be family left in town, the three that are on the ground are both from the 1800s. It would be a great opportunity to start a conversation with Historical Commission, because this is right up their wheelhouse. Kate Matson was, you know, very involved in getting it done for the cemetery next to Pilgrim Church. So I think that would be the next step, is I'd like to take it to them to see if they could get involved and potentially do an article for CPC to, you know, be able to find a path, you know, to whether fix or find a way to restore to some level. And that just seemed to be the easiest path forward.
It makes a lot of sense.
Question?
Yes, Sam.
Yeah, Sam, go ahead.
Is our cemetery in, there is a national register of graves that people go through graveyards and enter data in terms of who's buried there on the headstone information and so forth. It is actually pretty interesting for genealogists to track. Are we part of that, do you know?
I don't know.
This might be an opportunity, if we're doing that, if somebody's
Yeah.
going to go through to catalog, to actually collect the data.
Yeah.
And get them into that registry so people can do more extensive genealogical research. So,
Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm amazed when I wander through some of those, the old cemetery on top of the hill, and even in the main cemetery at the age of some of the headstones. It is, you're right, this is in Historical's wheelhouse. So
Yeah,
good
so
ideas across the board.
I'd be happy to, you know, to ask to be on the agenda to have the conversation. I just wanted to make sure it was the path that, you know, the board, it seems to be the path of least resistance this way.
I think it makes a lot of sense, Lisa.
Okay, great. I'll move forward with that.
Catherine, we're getting to you. I see Catherine McKee. I hope you got the World Series game or something interesting on another station while you're waiting for us to get to your letter. But anyway, thanks for hanging in. All right, this is you again, Lisa.
Yes, this one will be quick as well, I think.
Okay.
So, you know, we've talked a lot. Well, I've talked a lot about the CARES Act and the mortgage relief. We had a great meeting today. The emergency fund has met. That's who coordinates the application process through other towns. So our emergency fund has met. They have a few questions. They've looked it over. They think it's something that's doable. So we met at the townhouse today with Carla, who's going to be managing the reimbursement for the CARES Act through the town. Mr. Purple, Mr. Valentine, and Ms. Malinowski participated in that discussion as well. We have agreed on an application, which will be coming forth to the board. And it's a accumulation of Ashland and Holliston's applications, their guidelines. I'm working with Ms. Esposito tomorrow morning to get it updated between the two. So we should have something that works as far as the accounting standpoint for process. Having a conversation with Sarah Cassell tomorrow, and then we're going to do a call with the emergency fund before the end of the week to actually talk the process from their side is when they receive the application and the requirements. So we're moving ahead with this. I'm fingers crossed, hoping to have something. I know the agenda, Marty, is kind of full on the 27th, but I think if we can get something together and get it done and get a packet to the board that they can look it over, and the process will be spelled out a little better. We're hoping to use a date of November 1st through December 1st for the application process. And initially we're looking at putting $25,000 in. To that, the funding source, if CARES falls through, and would potentially, a suggestion would be the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, because it falls within the guidelines of that. There is funds to cover it if need be, but through the CARES Act, they actually have a program set up for this. So as long as we dot our I's and cross our T's, reimbursement shouldn't be an issue for this. And other towns are doing it. Some towns are actually matching with their CPC funds. So we're not. We're just looking to start out. And again, if we can help one family in town that may be in need at this point, and through this program as well, I think I said this before, and I'll end with this, is that through the application process, if you are receiving some form of government assistance at this point, you don't qualify. So it kind of lowers the number of applications we're probably going to get.
Interesting.
So I don't know, Chelsea, if there's anything that I may, or Mr. Purple, that I may miss from our conversation today.
The only thing I would add is I did watch the Youth Commission meeting last week, and Sarah did give them an update on that they were looking into this, and they were on board with pursuing it and seemed to think it was something that would be worthwhile to make available for the residents.
Perfect. And the only last thing I'll add is, and I know I said that once already, but there is opportunity for people that are getting some form of government assistance. There's the REF program that Governor Baker just approved. There's $171 million. So there's assistance all around, but this is a specific program through CARES, and the funds dry up on 12/30. So anything we could do to expedite. And again, the other towns have done the legwork. We're just kind of, they've got all the processes in place. We can mirror it, and hopefully we can help somebody. So that's it for me.
Should we apply for more than 25,000?
We set the amount, Sam, through CARES, but we were trying to be mindful of the fact that if something does fall through with CARES, we don't want it to be unmanageable, to be, there's to take it out of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. There's only a $70,000 balance in there right now. So I mean, it can certainly be readdressed if we find there's a greater need. We can come back and
But could we apply for more than the 25? And if we don't get anything, then we can take a certain amount out of affordable housing. We could take 10,000, 25 or whatever. Or do we have to set the total amount now?
So go ahead.
I'm sorry, Lisa. I'm just trying, to try to help. I think we can. We did have that conversation a little bit today. Town accountant said, we can be prospective on some of these things in that, and say we're doing this, this amount, but we anticipate, having X amount, X plus. So
Okay.
I don't know how much validation we need to have with that. I think to Lisa's point, if you've allocated 25,000 and we find out there's $40,000 in need, then then that's going to be what we submit to CARES.
Yeah.
So I think once the application process bears out what the need is, that we can adjust those numbers.
Okay, just don't want to leave money on the table if there's more. I think there's a lot of money in cares out there that
Yes.
you got to take advantage. I think there's a real need for this too. So
Yeah, there is, Sam.
Good.
And Holliston, when they did it, started out at 25. They did it, they're doing it in 2 rounds. And they actually went through theirs in a week. So who knows? We may be back having a discussion on this again, but we thought it was a good starting point. And through the program, we would include up to 2 months, and there's guidelines, and you'll have all of that information
good.
Before the end of the week, hopefully within the next couple days.
Good.
Okay, and the thing about the 27th, Lisa, is I'm just, it's not that it's getting jammed, it's that I'm trying not to let it get jammed.
Okay.
So, but if this is, time is of the essence here, if it's ready to go, then we can squeeze it on the 27th. But stuff that doesn't have to go immediately is not going on the 27th.
No, absolutely. And Marty, I'll have a better idea after I talk to Sarah tomorrow, because if they can't, again, if they need additional time for the process, we may have to fluctuate the dates a little bit, and it could put it off till November 4th potentially.
Okay.
Okay, I'll know. Thank you.
Catherine McKee, we are getting to your item. Everyone has seen the letter, the proposed letter. I mean, I think it's a terrific idea. And I also appreciate the fact that the Trails Committee turned it around quickly. And that the time is somewhat of the essence to get this done. I don't have any questions about it. It seems perfectly reasonable to me. It's continued, terrific effort by the Trails Committee to be able to do an entire loop around Southborough without leaving one of their trails. So nothing for me. Anyone else have any questions or comments?
Good letter.
Yeah, Mr. Shea.
Agree. Excellently written letter. So the one question I do have, will there be parking proposed in the vicinity where this new loop is? It's one of the things, I'm very, very supportive of the trails and have utilized them on many occasions myself, but just want to make sure that we have adequate area for people to park vehicles who then choose to get out and walk on the trails, and we're not parking on streets, resulting in trespassing through yards to get to the trails, etc.
No,
Yes.
that's a good point. Catherine, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. Good evening, and thank you again for letting me join the agenda tonight. So I appreciate everyone's time and that. So parking is a really important issue that is a problem kind of throughout town, and it's sort of handled and not in some cases. So in this case, and just to clarify, the Peninsula Trail will be part of the Boroughs Loop, which is inclusive of Southborough, Westborough, Northborough, and Marlborough, the entire community. So it's a 33-mile loop in all communities. And so the parking that we're proposing for this one section, which is currently being used by hunters, also as DCR has opened up the peninsula parcel for hunting, is the little access road. There's a gate at the end of Central Street and Route 30 at the intersection. Across the street from Central Street, there is an option for maybe 4 or 5 cars to park there. So that would be what we propose, but the project needs to be broader in scope in that if we're going to put parking there, if we're going to allow people to cross the street, we're going to need to consider a crosswalk for that intersection to make it safe. So that's something down the line. Additionally, we would like to put parking on the other side, but MWA has a Stony Brook Road goes into their facility, and they use that frequently. So they did not want any parking on that side. They want to keep that clear for their vehicles, but we may be able to use parking across the street at Genzyme. They have a parking lot that is often not filled, so that might be something we could work out in partnership with that company. So those are some ideas for this particular section.
Okay.
All right, and again, I don't think we need to are going to solve it tonight, but hopefully we can just keep this in mind and just keep in mind that we as a town maybe need to think of additional areas that we need to provide the public to be able to access the trail system and utilize them effectively.
Absolutely. And Brian, also, this will be down the street from Fayetteville Park. So although it adds a little bit of a walk, if you're out for a walk, it might not be a bad walk. You can park down there and walk along the sidewalk. However, then the sidewalk ends and you have to walk along the street, and it's a little bit tricky. And then you have to, approach kind of a dangerous intersection. So there are some dilemmas along, with that in mind. But we're looking to solve those, in chunks as we can.
No, it sounds like, Catherine, I'm pretty familiar with that area. And it used to be, that used to be a state police facility up there. I think they use it as a firing range or something. Is there no parking after you get right off of the intersection there? Because there used to be a gate, and those state police cars went somewhere.
Are you referring to the Central and Route 30 location?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a gate. You can't pass the gate, obviously, but you can put probably 3 to 5 cars there parked smart, I'll say. Not everyone's smart.
But past the gate, they're not going to allow the gate to open, because I got to believe there's some parking beyond that.
Right. Well, so you have to be careful because there are some houses that are really close to the trail. So I'm certain they're not going to want to put parking next to homes. But there may be an opportunity, to your point, Marty, that they put the gate further back and open that up a little bit more for some parking, because what we're planning on doing is adding some pretty nice interpretive and historical signs. So it may draw some interest from the community. So it might be something they would want to do to expand parking, but it just really depends on a lot of moving parts.
All right. Well, again, it sounds like you guys are thinking about the right things and looking in the right places. So
maybe if we had somebody on the NWRA advisory committee, he might be able to pull some strings and see if something can be worked out. Just
conceptually speaking.
Just conceptually.
Yeah, I do want to say that we have a really great working relationship right now with MWRA and DCR, and we're really appreciative of that. So far, I mean, things are moving slow, but that seems to be what trends when working on these types of projects. So I do want to give them a shout out for all.
Yeah, Sam's doing everything he can to rectify that situation.
Yeah. I have not put my finger in their eye yet.
All right. Is there a Chelsea, yes.
Sorry. So I actually talked to Catherine last night because there was a section in attachment B that I thought may require me to recuse myself from this vote. And so are we voting on the letter only or also on the MOA?
The MOA was just for information, was it not, Catherine?
No, I think that the letter has 2 requests. One is that we're asking DCR to consider extending the existing MOA, which expires in April of 2021. And the second request is, would you kindly move forward with the public access plan so we can get on and do our business with the trails? So to Chelsea's point, I read that section. So it's referring to parking on White Bagley, and it says permission will require a separate agreement. So what we would do is the extension of the agreement needs to be in writing, and we would just request that this entire bullet point be removed, because as we understand it, there's no parking because of a town bylaw from Route 9 to Route 30 on White Bagley. So it takes that it's no need to have that bullet point if we can't have parking on White Bagley.
Okay, so it sounded like something just got revised or edited that we had received.
So Chelsea brought up the concern that in attachment B of the memorandum, it states that we would explore parking on White Bagley as the Trails Committee, part of our.
What you're saying is you're proposing to just take that out.
Yes, exactly. So when we amend the agreement, which we have to do in April of 2021 or by that time, we as the Trails Committee would just suggest that we remove that in any new written agreement that we have, because it's not possible.
But we can't remove it now because it's an agreement.
This is it's just that attachment B was, we would like these things to happen during the time you have this active agreement.
So with that in there, Chelsea, you feel like you should recuse?
Yes, because I'm in a butter.
Okay, fair enough. All right, I move to approve the letter proposed by the Trails Committee.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Stivers. Discussion, none. Ms. Braccio.
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski is recused. Mr. Shea.
Aye.
Mr. Stivers.
Aye.
And Mr. Healy is aye.
Hey, Marty.
Good luck, Catherine.
So may I ask a couple of administrative questions?
Sure.
So would this letter come from you, Mr. Purple?
Yes, I will sign that on behalf of the board.
Great. And then I will send you Jim Montgomery's email. And can we CC Jamie Carr also? He's the regional director of the Sudbury and Wachusett watershed region, and he's our direct contact at this point. And may I also ask that you copy me as the Trails Committee Chair on that?
You send me all the instructions and emails and I'll do what you need me to do.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate everyone's support here.
Hey, Marty?
Wait a minute. Catherine, are you all set?
Oh yeah, one more thing, Mark. There was an extra space, as you'll probably notice if you look in the paragraphs. Just if you could fix that, you know, for your own sanity.
All right. Is Mr. Shivers, is your comment for Ms.
Yeah,
McKee?
one quick comment. Mart, to your point about the road beyond the gate there at Central Street, I just took a quick look on Google Earth, and that there's a long road there that has a lot of parking along it. So I would not rule that out in terms of opportunity, in terms of asking the question. So
Yeah, the state police used to use it.
yeah,
So
it goes back, looks like a burial ground back there.
No,
Wow.
it's actually an access shaft
I want to
to,
be respectful of the abutters. You know, we have to keep them friendly.
Okay.
Want to be.
Right. All right, Catherine.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for hanging in.
Have a great night.
All right.
Good night.
You know, Ms. Jasinski is lurking out there. I'm wondering if she's just fascinated by our discussion or if she's got some public comment coming up.
I think she went to sleep 3 hours ago.
Or she's got some new artwork for me. All right. Final item before adjournment is second round of public comment. And I do not see anyone's hand up. Dorianne, thank you for taking the good-natured ribbing. And don't swear at me next time you see me. All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
second.
Discussion none. Ms. Braccio,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski,
Hi.
Mr. Shea,
Aye.
Mr. Stivers.
Aye.
Why did you delay, Ms. Malinowski? You're having too much fun?
More member report.
Mr. Healy is aye.